Looks like 7:30 and we have all of our council members present. So let's go ahead and begin the city council meeting for Thursday, May the 4th, our study session. Welcome to everyone. All of our council is present, as I indicated earlier. The first item on our agenda for this meeting is to review and discuss items on the agenda for the May 18th, 2020 regular and special council meetings. So council, please refer to the agenda for that meeting. I note that Mr. Brady, this is, and Mr. Smith, there's also a special council meeting. Why don't we begin with that? What can you tell us about the special council meeting?
Mayor and council, we call a special council meeting for the adoption of the budget. It's just required by state statute. So that's why you end up doing Monday night, you'll do the regular council meeting, and then you'll close that and you'll immediately go into the special council meeting.
Okay. And that's just approving the budget item, or the agenda item that we talked about last Thursday, which is kind of the legal technicality of adopting a budget, even though we haven't gone through all of the due diligence of coming up with the line items that we're going to.
Well, yeah, Mayor, we just essentially, like we told you, we've rolled over last year, I guess this year's budget to next year with those changes that we identified in the, mostly in public safety. So that's consistent with what we presented to you. And I also want to make note that also in that special council meeting, you also have the public hearing on the secondary property tax.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
So Chris, does that mean we're not going to get the individual budget recommendations from each of the departments? We're just going to roll up a budget from last year to this year? Yes,
sir. Yeah, Mayor and Councilor Thompson, that's correct. We're at the end of the time when we have to approve the budget now. And that's why we informed the council we were just going to roll the budget over from this current year to next year. And then each month we're going to come back as needed to review with council any other adjustments we need to make to that budget, specifically as we identify what's happening with the revenues that are impacting our budget going forward into the future.
Is there a way that you can, and maybe you already sent this and I just missed it, but Chris, is there any way that you can get us, or at least get me like a line item of what each department's budget recommendation is from last year going into this year, and what our CIP looks like as well? Because I'm guessing the CIP is a 5-year approval, right? So
right. And
but any of the open projects that are already funded and so forth that we're moving to this year to be considered, and but yeah, just so I have a big picture item of what the budget's going to look like for each department.
Okay, so I don't know that I'll let Candace speak to that. Again, we just pretty much rolled over this past year. We do have a CIP that we have on your agenda also. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Thompson, the tentative budget, when we adopted the tentative budget, there was an attachment to that. That was the summary of any changes from the current fiscal year budget, so 1920 going into 2021, and it does outline by department if there were any changes in the budget. The major changes were in the public safety area due to the public safety sales tax.
So was that on last week's study session?
Yeah.
Attachments in?
Correct.
Correct. When the
Okay.
tentative budget was considered by council, it was one of those attachments that has a 2021 budget summary. It's about a 20-page document, so it'll give.
Okay, I'll go back and
each
look.
Department. And then.
Okay, I'll go back and take a look.
And then go ahead.
And then on the agenda we're reviewing this morning for the 18th for Monday, that does have the capital improvement program. So it has a summary, a fiscal summary, and it also has a project summary.
That's item number 9, Councilman Thompson, on the agenda
Okay.
that you're reviewing right now.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
Chris, we all know during a normal year, council sits through, many meetings, budget hearings where departments come in and talk about what they've done the past year, what their hopes and dreams are for the next year, and why they're kind of defending their budgets. I know what we're doing on Monday is really just setting, it's complying with state law and it's setting a ceiling, thou shalt not spend more than this amount of money. Are we still, is the plan still, after we take care of that technicality, we'll still, to some extent, although I know that this next year is going to be more about saving money and finding ways to overcome revenue losses than it is, the nice problem of spending money. But we'll still be hearing from the departments. We'll still be talking about the specifics of a budget going forward.
So Mayor, Council, really we're just anticipating that as we go through the year and as you said, as we identify the need to make adjustments, that's why we mentioned last week that we're asking each department to come up with a 10% reduction plan, except for public safety, which we've asked for a 5% reduction plan. And then looking at rolling those out over a period of time, not at one time. And as we bring that to, as we determine the need to implement those reductions, then yes, with those departments that are most impacted in those reduction plans, we would present those to council. I don't anticipate that right now, based on what we know and frankly more about what we don't know yet, I don't expect that much of that will happen until we get through the summer. We still just don't see a lot of, we don't have the opportunity to see a lot of the time period that we've been through in the impacts of the economy. We just won't see that for a couple more months out. We've starting to see a little bit of what March is going to look like, and frankly, it almost looks flat from the year before, but that's still preliminary. But we don't know what April and May look like, and then we don't know how fast the recovery is. So until that was the plan, is just to adopt last year's budget and then come to council, probably beginning sometime maybe after you come back from the summer break. We'll have more information. And then we can begin, we'll have the plans in place from the departments, then we would come to council if needed to discuss those reduction plans, and we could bring those departments to the council at that time.
Okay, thank you. So for the special council meeting on Monday, like as you indicated, that'll be a separate meeting. We'll be adopting the budget. And then it'll be again, another airplane that we're flying while we're building it. It sounds like as we see the budget numbers, the revenue numbers come in over the next few months, and we get a feeling for how deeply impacted the budget's going to be by the loss of revenues.
That's correct, Mayor. And also I should mention that in that special council meeting, again, mentioned the secondary property tax levy. So we're maintaining the levy the same as it is this year.
Okay. All right, council, any other questions about the special council meeting? Thank you. Then referring to the agenda for the regular council meeting, any questions or any additional information you'd like? Mr. Luna.
Yes, Chris, I was wondering if you could talk about 4I, and that has to do with CARES Act supporting Falcon Field Airport. Now, is that part of the funding that we received, or is that a different funding source or monies directed just for Falcon Field?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Luna. These are funds that came to the state for aviation purposes, and this is the allocation that the state has distributed to Falcon Field specifically. So it did not come out of the allocation that was given directly to the city. It is coming from a different source, specifically for aviation purposes. We know both Falcon Field received this amount, as well as Gateway Airport also received a significant amount of assistance that came through the state also.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Chris, I'd like to pull item 5D for continuance, pending a discussion with the developer.
5B?
5D. D is in Delta.
Oh, sorry.
5 Delta.
Okay.
I'd just like to continue that unless I hear from the developer over the week, today or tomorrow or over the weekend.
So
So
let
I'd
me
prefer
ask
to
for
continue that one.
do we need to continue to a specific date,
Yeah, well,
Jim?
yeah.
So, Councilmember, we'll just need to continue it to, let's see, a specific date. So do you want to do it like the first meeting in June? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's fine. That should be enough time for the developer to reach back out
Okay,
for a conversation. Like I said, unless he calls, over the weekend. If he does, then I'm fine putting it back on the
okay.
agenda, but
well,
Well, then, let's not post it as a continuance, because then once we post it, it would be continuous. Someone just do the motion.
so, Councilmember, if it's okay, we'll leave it on as is. Then Monday, if you haven't had your, gotten the response or what that you need, then let's make the motion to continue it to a specific date, June, which would be June
Okay.
1st. That way,
Sounds good.
post it now for June 1st, it'll have to go to June 1st, so.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
We'll pay attention to that, okay.
Council, any other additional information you'd like for regarding the agenda for Monday? Yes, Councilmember Duff.
Yes, I'd like a little bit of a review about what we're doing on the the utility rates for low-income seniors on 5A.
Sure. Mayor and Councilmember Duff, as you recall, oh boy, I can't remember when was it, what month, when did we do this? Before COVID. I don't remember what the date was, but remember we brought to you the ordinance related to utility assistance and that whole package where we talked about providing additional funding for utility assistance, but we also included in there a specific low-income senior discount, and that's 30% off of the service charge. So it's a fixed amount. So what we need to do, even though the council approved that in the ordinance for that for the utility for that change, we need to come and make a specific rate adjustment. So this is just a follow-up to the ordinance the council already approved, which is making eligible a reduction for low-income seniors off the service charge. So that's what this is.
Great, thank you very much.
Council, other questions? Mr. Whitaker.
Chris, do you have any more information on item 4H, the COVID funding for that as well? Or can you just provide some details in regards
Sure.
to 4H?
Well,
Is it basically the same thing as 4I? Is it just distribution from the state?
Yeah, well, and this came, I think, specifically through a program from the federal government to public safety, which allows for them to be reimbursed for the PPE that they had they've acquired. And so this is just another pot of dollars that's coming in from a different direction than the dollars we received, which is good because we'd already allocated some of these, some dollars, or assumed some of the 90 million we had would have to cover that cost. So this is separate and in addition to that. So there's just a variety of different funding resources that we're becoming aware of over time, but this was specifically for public safety. And so that's what that's providing for information that you're receiving on that.
Okay. And I have a question going back to the item that Jen had just asked about, the item 5A, the low-income senior water discount. I know that the federal government has obviously given us the $90 million to allocate towards things that were impacted by COVID. And I guess my question would be, does it make more sense to somehow, for lack of a better word, cancel this portion of it and then refund it using the $90 million from the COVID funding, since those will be funds that will be written off by the federal government?
Councilman, I think I understand what you're saying. However, I guess I would say this: the rate adjustment that is consistent with the ordinance that council's already approved would be ongoing, right, for years to come. The 90 million has to be spent by the end of December, and it has to be specifically for COVID-related impact. So actually, your question is timely, because later this morning, we're going to present you essentially taking that same utility assistance program that we have standing up today, where we provide assistance to individuals who are falling behind and paying their utility bills, and we've allocated $125,000 to assist in that. And we partner with Mesa Can to refer our individuals to that program. We're actually going to suggest a significant contribution from the $90 million, anticipating that many residents may have a difficulty because of loss of job or reduced hours of their employment, having difficulty paying their utilities. And what we're going to be, I hate to take all the thunder away, but we're going to recommend that we use some of that $90 million to stand behind that same program, so that we anticipating the demand for utility assistance is going to be much greater than the $125,000 we've already put in place. So that's how we're looking at it, is kind of separately. We look at the rate as something that will continue beyond December, and we just want to make sure we get the rate in place so we can start applying that discount now. And then to your point, though, we are looking at using the CARES funding to provide assistance to individuals who are falling behind and paying their utility bills. We'll identify them, and then, like we do today, send them to the Mesa Can, and then they will help us process those individuals and help them get their utilities paid. And what we're offering too is more than just their city utilities, that we would also help pay for, especially during the summer, their energy bill also.
Yeah, I guess my only question was specific to this year's budget. You know, obviously, as things get skinny because you know, lack of incoming revenues. You know, and I don't know. Maybe this program, if I understand you correctly, is just for subsequent years. But I guess what I'm asking is, would it make sense to take the money that's allocated to that program and push it back into our general fund budget?
Oh, yeah. So,
to help.
Yeah, Councilor, it's a great question. Mayor and Councilman Whitaker, we thought about that at the beginning when we received the money from the federal government, but it became very clear when we received guidance that we could not use this to revenue. We couldn't use it for revenue replacement. So, but recognizing that we do provide utilities as an essential service to residents, it was determined, as long as we were able to continue to use existing programs through the nonprofits, kind of a separate arm from the city to process these payments, that would be eligible. But we couldn't just go credit people's accounts from the city. So we're trying to be end up in the same place, but do it in a way that avoids going outside the guidance from the federal government.
Okay.
Thank you. Council, other questions regarding Monday night's agenda? Okay. I think that we're done with that agenda item then. The next item on our agenda for this meeting is item 2A. That's to hear a presentation on the status of City of Mesa recreational facilities and discuss and provide direction on future plans for reopening limited facilities. Mr. Brady, Mr. Hirschberg.
I'll let Mr. Hirschberg start. So as we've tried to keep up with the changing environment and changing of the orders from the governor, and so we want to present to you some plans. Mark will start, and you'll hear we have a couple other presentation, or not, a presentation from the library also to talk about how we're beginning to roll open many of our recreation and library facilities. So Mark.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. As you recall, last week we updated you on the status of the majority of our parks and recreation facilities, and awaiting the governor's direction, as well as monitoring those of our neighboring communities. Throughout the course of this pandemic, we've been monitoring a number of resources to help guide us in our decisions and our plans of where we're headed. And you can see a number of those there. For those of watching at home or for yourselves, there's all those are hyperlinks, so you can go directly to those sources and see what's happening throughout and what the recommendations are from the various sources. And again, most notably, the governor's orders and his guidance that he just released this week for pools and gyms and fitness providers. So with that, we have kind of laid out a detailed plan. I'll give you the highlights, the executive summary, if you will, of how we would do a phased reopening based on this guidance. Go business function basically for within the department. So the first business function is parks. And then in each of these slides, you'll see the red box leads to the current status of what's open, what's closed. And then the phase one reopening, and then it's yellow, the blues are the next phase, and then green is basically when things are better and moving forward as normal, if you will, new normal. Current status for parks, again, we've had the parks have been open throughout this pandemic. The turf areas, trails, urban fishing lakes, dog parks, skate parks, disc golf courses, the restrooms at Riverview, Red Mountain, Pioneer, and Greenfield have remained open. In phase one, we are recommending that we return pickleball, tennis, volleyball, and basketball courts in the parks for drop-in use. We'll reopen the ramadas for non-reservations as well as playgrounds and splash pads. And again, some of this stuff, if council's in agreement, we can start sooner than June 1 on these. It's just going to take us a little bit while. It's a lot easier to take the nets and things down than it is to get them back up and leveled again. So, but we can start taking down caution tape and everything else sooner than later if council desires. Phase two reopening, we're still working with our contractor. There is still a shortage and slow delivery of a lot of custodial and cleaning supplies. So we can't open all of the restrooms at this point based on some of those supply issues, but we will look at, by June 29th, working with our contractors to get all of the previously closed restrooms back open as soon as we can based on the availability of supplies. And then once gatherings and group sizes are continue to expand, we will look at doing Ramada reservations in the future.
Mr. Thompson has a question. Mark.
Mark, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. On reopening, I'm all for opening sooner rather than later if we can. But with the question, are we going to be doing regular sanitization of the playgrounds and splash pads? Well, splash pads probably not so much because I think the chlorine will kill the COVID, is what CDC is saying. But for the ramadas and the playgrounds, they're going to be routine cleaning, weekly cleaning or daily cleaning, something of that matter, or something of that nature that's going to, ensure that that we're killing any virus that may be lingering out there.
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, we will continue with our regular cleans that we do first thing in the morning. So we've been doing that throughout this process. We are continuing to investigate and have demos on additional equipment and supplies that could help us with this process. We're also working with our contractors to get what labor costs would look like to do more detailed sanitization of playground equipment and the picnic tables, those type of things, as you mentioned. But again, all of these things with the amount of amenities that we have within the park system, we're doing these things first thing in the morning. So a lot of this is going to continue to be on the public to recognize that we're in there first thing in the morning and we can't go back multiple times throughout the day. We just can't keep up with that kind of service level. Right. And we will continue.
Well, and I think there has to be some, responsibility placed on the citizens too, that, it's kind of like, you hear people complaining about restaurants being open and it's like, well, if you're upset the restaurants are open, then just don't go to the restaurant, right. And me, it's the same thing here. I don't mind opening up the parks, but there has to be some personal responsibility as well. If you don't like the park being open, then don't go to the park. But I think there's enough utilization within our community that people are ready to get back to playing and running and exercising and doing the things that they typically would do pre-COVID, but early in the mornings or late in the evenings now that it's warming up outside.
And Mayor, Council Member, since the pandemic began, we've had signs in place that encourage social distancing and reminding people to wash hands, use sanitizer. And we'll continue to leave those signs up. We'll take the closed amenity signs down, but we'll leave those signs in place just as reminders as well.
Mark, Mr. Heredia, and then Councilmember Duff has a question.
Hey, Mark, when you say cleaning every morning, is it something that you all change as far as the type of cleaning that you do, or what's the type of cleaning, I guess? That's my first question.
Yeah. Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, yes, before it was pre-COVID, it was just a power wash. We'd go in there and just power wash with high pressure, obviously, and water. We've added a bleach solution to that mix now, so to try and help disinfect on a more regular basis there.
And you said you do all playgrounds and picnic areas, or like ramadas?
The playgrounds get a little bit tricky. They are more hit and miss, just depending on who's there, what time of day they actually get there. And it's hard with all the water that comes off the structures into those wood chips, that we don't want to create a different issue. So as I mentioned, we are continuing to investigate other supplies that are more of a misting type of system. But again, service and delivery is key here on the supply line of everybody's trying to get those things at the same time. So we have some demos set up for some pieces of equipment that we think can help with that process next week. And we'll continue to investigate those and look at how we deploy those. Again, the playground piece of spraying and sanitizing every playground, just the number of structures that are in each play pit is pretty labor intensive. So we're trying to identify those costs and scheduling and what that looks like as well.
Then one other question. Hey, did you say, is this done by in-house employees, or do we normally vend that out, or are you looking at vending out with a contractor or multiple contractors to be able to keep on doing this?
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, so the cleans were being done by our in-house contractor. As we went through this process and started closing amenities, we redeployed some of our staff to do more of this throughout the day. As we go through this reopening plan, that staff will have to be redeployed back into their normal jobs to provide these facilities and services to reopen. So we are working with our current contractor, park maintenance contractor that assists us on cleaning, and our custodial contractors to help us identify those labor costs, as well as we're working with our park staff, parks and aquatic maintenance staff, to identify if there's what it would look like and what services would be missing if we had to redeploy them and use in-house labor. Evaluating all the options.
And Mayor and Council, let me just jump in real quick. I think we believe that we anticipate some of this additional cost. We can also charge off on that CARES funding too. So we think it allows for us to recover some of this additional cost that we're having to expend for this purpose, at least through December.
Thank you, Frankie. Councilmember Duff.
Mr. Brady just answered my question, but I have other thing just to point out. On the first page of the presentation on the CDC guidelines, the reopening guidance for disinfecting and cleaning public spaces and workplaces, we just need to fix that link so that it works. So okay. That's my only comment.
Thank you for pointing that out. We'll get that fixed.
Thank you, Mark. I have a question. Number one, I just want to compliment you on in reviewing the presentation. Obviously, a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and in a thoughtful way in a way that's sensitive to the health concerns that we all have to re-engage these facilities. So just thank you for the hard work that went into this presentation. But the blue box is phase 2 reopening. As you know, phase 2 is a term of art, coined by the White House that with definitions attached to it. Governor Ducey, from his press conference on Monday, clearly has stated that he believes that Arizona is in phase 1 right now. We have phase 2 reopening June 29th. Who decides that we're in phase 2? Yeah. Are we just using that as a default for June the 29th, or is there something else that's going to trigger us acknowledging that we're moving from one step to another?
Mayor, no, that was a term we just used for our own guidance of our target dates, not tied to the White House or the governor's plans.
Okay. So really, at this point, you're suggesting that we progress on June the 29th to the next stage, and then I see in parentheses pending other executive orders or information from public health authorities.
Right, Mayor. In most cases, most of what you'll see in phase 2 as we go through the presentation are things that were already identified in, if you will, the governor and the White House's phase 1 reopening of America and returning Arizona stronger plans. Excuse me. For us, this is just the timing that we need to ramp up services and facilities to be able to provide those services.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Moving on, golf at Dobson Ranch Golf Course, as you recall, that service has remained available to the public with some limitations, single cart riders, takeout food only. With the changes in the restaurant restrictions, staff and the provider over there are working with the restaurant and social distancing requirements. And then once we continue to see that happen, and then once things are all clear, we'll go back to the normal operations with no cart restrictions and moving forward. Our community centers, recreation centers, currently all of them are closed. Our phase 1 target for June 1, based on the governor's recommendations this week, is to reopen the Red Mountain Center for the fitness area and the walking track with limited hours. So we are working, we view this as a reservation type system where you need to check in advance and reserve a time to come in. We're working to create social distancing on the different pieces of fitness equipment to provide that spacing, and then again ramping up with custodial and sanitation supplies and sanitation stations to make sure we stay on top of that.
Mark, Mr. Thompson has a question, and then Mr. Luna.
Mark, with when you start talking about opening gyms and stuff like the community center, the Red Mountain Fitness Center, and so forth, I like the idea of keeping the number of individuals, the maximum occupancy levels down. But on a reservation status, how do you keep somebody coming in there and staying for half a day and not allowing someone else to come in? You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
Like if it normally takes you an hour to do your workout, but you decide you're going to hang out for a couple of hours and chit chat with your friends, is there any guidelines, or is there going to be something in place where our volunteers will kind of move them along so that the next person on the waiting list to come in can come in and get their workout in as well?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, we view this as you're registering through all of these programs that you'll see throughout this morning for a specific amount of time. And then there'll be a buffer in there of 20, 30 minutes, whatever that looks like, so that we can move that group of people that were registered for that time slot out. The next group will come in. And that in-between time gives us an opportunity for staff to go in and sanitize restrooms, sanitize the equipment, wipe things down, and we will monitor that usage.
Okay, that was going to be my next question: is how do you ensure the cleanliness of the facility throughout the day? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Luna.
Hi, Mark. I might suggest that you do colored bands like some of our like Uptown Jungle, for example. If you get a red band, you're available. You can exercise from 9 to 10. Once red band expires, then you give them a yellow band for 10 to 11. I think you and I had that discussion at the Red Mountain Center. What about when we talk about some of the classes that the group fitness classes? Are you going to open those as well in June, or are we going to suspend those until later time? And what about using the basketball courts at the Red Mountain Center?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Luna. Yes, we are looking at that. We are trying to determine how to do this on the suggestion of bans. We're trying to limit how we try to make this as contactless as possible. So we're continuing to explore those options of how we identify, and we think by building those time slots in there and having staff in the facility monitoring, that it'll just be that we'll clear out based on that. But we're continuing to work through that process and those details. As far as fitness classes, you'll see on phase 2, where we're aiming for starting to implement that hopefully between July and August. We need to work with our fitness instructors in particular to look at how they modify their classes and how we modify the spacing to provide those classes with the group size limitations that remain in place through the governor's executive orders. And those are still maximums of 10, so we're looking at offering those programs at a 9-to-1 ratio, and we hope to have those up and running again between July and August, along with any other additional special interest classes that are typically offered out of the facility. In terms of the gyms, for drop-in basketball, we do not foresee that happening in the immediate future because basketball is still considered a contact sport, and that is not recommended still according to the CDC. But we do see us, if depending on how our details push out, scheduling some limited other activities in the gym space.
So I had a follow-up relative to the Webster and Jefferson facility. My understanding is that Mesa Public Schools is closed, will be closed during the summer. Are you working with the school district to alert them that these facilities will then be open and available? Despite the fact that there won't be any programs available in the school district at that time.
Mayor, council member, these are all moving very fast, so we are communicating with the school district as fast as we can. And as you lead into Webster, Jefferson, and Broadway and Eagles, we've always partnered and continue to partner at these summer facilities, in particular with MPS, in particular for their summer meals distribution sites. We do foresee that continuing to happen. We are working through those plans regardless what the opening and facilities look like. But we are getting and continuing to hear a need for increased childcare opportunities and summer camp opportunities. So we see utilizing these facilities in multiple spaces for summer camp registration. Again, these will not be our typical summer camps. There won't be any field trips. We will limit the sizes and they will be much more reduced. In many of our summer camps, we have upwards of 150 to 200 children throughout the day. We will be limiting and we are at a point where we can offer, based on the ratios and spacing, to keep those groups in 10, where we can only offer camps to 32 children at a time at each of these locations. And Eagles Recreation Center, community center, we're proposing that location is specifically an adaptive camp for those individuals that need those services.
Hey, Mark, and follow up on the Red Mountain Center. I know that we work with Astor Adults, the Adult Resource Center. Are you working with them as well? Because many seniors take advantage of that facility over at Red Mountain. Are you going to make that available as well? And that is a very vulnerable population. Yes. So I worry about them going into the Red Mountain facility because they are a vulnerable population. How are we going to deal with that? What communication have you had with Astor?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember, our staff continues to work with Astor on their services. They are not prepared to come in at this time. They're working on their phased reopening plan and how they're going to ramp up their services. What we see is to restrict this access and the limitations, we see providing early in the morning, there's going to be gaps throughout the day of the services that we're providing once Astor's ready to come back in. So I could see early in the morning to mid-morning, we're providing services for the general community. For the middle of the day, Astor's providing their services. And then towards the end, early evening, into the evening, we're returning those back, some more fitness and drop-in classes for the general public.
But I think I just say, I think right now, almost all the guidelines suggest that the vulnerable populations stay home. So we would probably not explicitly offer any programs for that age group right now.
Correct. And Astor is well aware of those and continues to monitor the situation. And they have indicated to us that they're not at that point yet and won't be returning at this schedule.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Mark, can you talk a little bit more about the boredom buster programs that you're talking about bringing back? I'm pleased to see that you're proposing that, but I'm frankly a little nervous and a little bit surprised. This is risky business that we're in, where we're creating large crowds of kids. I'm glad we're doing it because there's a lot of families in our community that this is, a huge part of their lives. They really rely on this, for daycare and for summer activities. So I'm encouraged that we're doing it, but how can we keep our employees safe? How can we keep these crowds of kids safe? Can you just maybe give me some more reassurance that this is a good idea?
Yeah, Mayor, we are working with purchasing, fire to secure no-touch temporal thermometers, the PPE, all of that for regardless of the facility to make sure staff is protected. For the summer program, for these modified summer camps in particular, we see these, again, it's limited, so it'll be one staff member to 9 children, and they will be isolated into different groups. They'll be, the regular hand washing is throughout the day, and as they're moving from activity to activity, there'll be gaps in between where staff will stay back before the next group comes in and wipes down tables and surfaces and everything else, and then continue as they rotate through their different activities. But there won't be a lot of movement. It's just really moving from, half the gym to do whatever fitness activity to an arts and crafts activity, just to kind of keep them occupied, because as you indicated, this is something we're hearing as things and businesses return back. Parents are looking for childcare options, and so we're trying to do the best we can in the limited services to provide that service if we can. But we are continuing to work with and monitor neighborhood partners and neighboring communities of what they're doing in this area as well, and following the best practices throughout the industry on how to make this work the best way. And you're absolutely correct, Mayor. We don't want to put our staff at any risk, nor the participants, and we'll continue to modify and adjust as accordingly to make sure that occurs.
Okay, thank you. My suspicion is that those programs will fill up instantly, and that the demand will be far greater than what we're able to accommodate. But I guess doing all we can is all we can do. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of recreation programs and where we're at, again, we do not see this summer returning any of our regular programming. It will be very limited, as I just discussed, with the 9-to-1 ratios, with limited special interest programs, limited drop-in fitness programs as we get through there, and the limited summer camp opportunities at the centers we mentioned. As things continue to progress and we monitor those situations, and as the spread of the virus lessens, we will continue to add programming accordingly within the guidelines established and as they continue to be rolled out. Sports fields and complexes. Again, all of those facilities are currently closed. In phase 1, by June 1, we do plan on returning limited hours for reservation-only court rental at the Mesa Tennis Center. And again, this will function much like the Red Mountain Center, as I discussed. You'll have to pre-register for your court time in advance. You'll have limited times. We'll limit the amount of people on a court, and then there'll be a gap in between, so any touch points can be sanitized before the next group comes in. We're looking at opening our sports complexes for rentals for individual team practices only. No games, no tournaments, only team practices. And but prior to us releasing those fields, each user group will need to present a plan to the city on how they plan on their strategies of how they're going to limit the group size and capacity restrictions and encourage social distancing through their practices and how they plan on doing that, as well as their notification procedures if someone does have symptoms. How do they notify the rest of their user group as well as the city so that we can take the necessary precautions as soon as they hear about it?
Mr. Thompson has a question.
Mark, I've been out of the Little League game for a while, but when does Little League typically start, the season start?
They would have started, some started in February and some start in March.
Okay, and so is it getting towards the end of the Little League season right now?
Again, I do not foresee games. Nobody is recommending and through any of the guidelines that games or tournaments occur. This would be for practices only. So a number of the Little Leagues have already canceled their seasons completely. And there's a few that are hanging on to see if it's possible. And again, I am not suggesting or recommending games or tournaments occur or providing those services for those groups.
Well, I know that there's some teams out there that are going to start up their summer ball programs now that the governor's made the declaration or executive order that sports facilities and stuff could be opened back up. So I know there's already some teams that have plans in work for older kids, not necessarily Little League, but teams have plans in work for starting summer ball up within the next month or two. And so I was looking, just thinking about that from a standpoint of our sports facilities that we have, the complexes that we have around the city, if we were to open those up to tournament play or to team play versus just individual practices.
So again, based on the CDC guidelines, it's not recommending that games or tournament play occur. They are suggesting that practices in a controlled environment can occur. And we'll continue to monitor those guidance from the CDC and if something changes with the governor's office. But again, we're suggesting this is for individual team practices only because of the social distancing that can be scheduled and in place. And we just received plans from yesterday from the Arizona State Youth Soccer Association that all of their member organizations are suggesting, and they have a 5-phase approach of how this works, and games and competitive team play or recreational team play are the very last phase with no date set, and the very first phase just called, much like we're suggesting here, for limited team practices.
Okay, thank you.
Phase 2, we will, again, we'll start this sooner, most likely than June 29th, once we get this first phase set and teams scheduled accordingly as they see fit. But then we'll begin accepting reservations for fall usage just to have the fields reserved and booked. And then we'll continue to monitor, as I mentioned, that guidance we received from health officials in the state on when tournament and league play will begin. Special events, again, with the crowd restrictions in place, we've suspended all special events. We don't see that changing in the near future, but then we'll continue to discuss and further review and discussion how events, if there's a way to modify events and what those look like, and we'll take those case by case and have those discussions directly. And then obviously, once everything returns to normal, we'll continue to hopefully go back to gathering again as a community. Aquatics. Again, currently all the facilities are closed. We are recommending by June 1, we will reopen reopen Keno and Skyline only for reservation-only lap swim, limited and reduced capacity swim lessons, and then coalition team rentals. We are working with our Mesa Aquatics coalition teams for the utilization of the Skyline Aquatics complex to begin on Tuesday, May 26th for limited practice hours for them. Again, but we've asked all of those teams in advance of that to provide us, much like the field sports groups, with plans on how they plan on promoting social distancing, their notification, their capacity restrictions, et cetera. So we're waiting for those plans, and then we'll work with each of those user groups to allocate space accordingly based on their plans and the needs and the time that we can accommodate.
Mr. Thompson.
I'm sorry. On the aquatics, when would we normally open? If there was no coronavirus, when would we normally open? Would that be right after Memorial Day weekend?
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, would be Memorial Day weekend. So we are.
So you're not too far off now.
No. For the general public, we are 1 week behind schedule.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Mark, can you clarify, in a normal season, we have a wonderful, amazing aquatics program. Lots of kids are at the pool doing, not just with the swim lessons, but with swim team, and we have swim meets and so on. As I read your chart, what you're suggesting is that the competitive swim team program that we've had in the past is suspended this year. and we're having, quote, limited and reduced capacity swim lessons. Can you describe to me what that means? You know, if I want my kid to go to the local pool and, you know, get some time in the chlorinated water and learn how to swim, is that what we're talking about, or is it something more or less than that?
No, Mayor, you're correct. Again, and I want to point out, this is not all 9 pools in phase 1. This is just Skyline and Keno in this phase. And we're looking at, for example, for the Learn to Swim lessons, those are scheduled. You have to pre-register. The class sizes will be limited to, based on the level of the lesson, the participants will be limited. We're going to change for those lower level classes where there's still, we typically staff a lifeguard assist in the water providing those services. We're going to now require that the parent be in the water with the child, and there's 3. And the instructor will give the parents the instructions for the 3 participants in the class, and they're actually helping them develop those skills with guidance from the instructor. For those that can swim and are more advanced for the upper lessons, this instructor will teach from the deck as opposed to being in the water with the participants. For the open swim, it is much like the Red Mountain Center and the tennis center that I mentioned. It will be a reservation only, so there'll be a larger gap there, obviously. So if it's a 2-hour window, then you'll come in for those 2 hours. There'll be a half hour in between so we can sanitize, clean again, and then the next group will be allowed to come in for the open swim. But we are not doing our normal synchro and dive and swim teams that we have at every pool this summer. We will suspend those for this summer and then hopefully return back to normal operations next summer.
Okay, I get ahead of your presentation, but it looks like the next phase, you're talking about opening up some additional pools. And is that the scenario you described? Would that continue into phase 2 as well, or is there some escalation in the amount of activity that would occur besides what you've just described?
Correct, Mayor. And let me go back real quick and mention, much like the field sports, again, we are not going to allow swim meets at these facilities this summer as well, as that is still discouraged as well. Even in the governor's guidance, he discouraged the swim meet themselves. So we are, this is for those coalition teams to get back to practicing.
Mark, Mr. Freeman has a question for you.
Hi, Mark. Are your hours of operation going to change any from reduced hours, or going to be the same time frame?
No, the hours will be reduced just so we can accommodate all these groups, and it'll be more structured. We're working through those final details and guidance. We wanted your guidance this morning before we finalize those and make those available to the public of where they'll be.
So what are your hours of operation?
We are,
I think our hours will be about the same.
About the same.
It's just that more people are going to have to share those hours with fewer pools. I think that's what we're trying to get to.
So we will start as early as, depending on what's in there, as early as 4:45 in the morning and go as late as 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, depending on what the schedule looks like and how we rotate the different groups and programs in there throughout those facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and let's be clear, what Mr. Freeman's asking what the hours are. As I read this chart, there's no time during the day that a member of a family can just walk up and say, I'd like to give you a couple of dollars and go in and swim. The only people that are going in are people that are registered for lessons or people that are practicing as part of a club program.
That is correct. And then in phase 2, we're suggesting we open Rhodes and Shepherd, and we also add in a pre-registration for open swim so that those families that are looking for something to do for a couple hours at a time, they can register for those slots to come in for open swim. And that will be limited capacities based on the space available at each pool.
And that's something that would happen after June the 29th, and would it be only at Rhodes and Shepherd, or would it also be at Skyline and Keno?
Correct, all 4 pools at that point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Mark, and I know this goes back to the mayor's question just now, but on phase 1, it says reservation only lap swim. So does that mean, because I know that there's some folks in our community that that is their exercise regimen is doing lap swimming. Would it be open to those, or is it only the teams that we're opening for during phase one?
No, that would be.
If it's reservation only, I mean, that means kind of anybody can come in and do their 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10 laps, whatever they do, and then get out, and the next person can come in and do, right?
Correct, Mayor, Councilmember Thompson. That is for anybody, that's the fitness lap swim. So again, a pre-registration, There'll be an hour window, or for example. Again, that's not finalized, so but there'll be that window of time to come in and do that activity. We'll have another gap in between that scheduling, and then the next group will come in and participate.
Okay, thank you.
So again, phase two, just to recap, since we've moved back and forth between both phases there, phase two would add roads and skyline, which would also provide the flow rider. And again, that would be a scheduled activity as well, much like we've talked about. And then at all 4 pools, we would add the limited open swim to the at this phase as well. Just as you're working with your colleagues from across the community, we thought it was helpful to kind of give an idea of where other communities were at in terms of aquatics in particular, and some of the schedules and modifications that they're looking at. You can see that we're not far off. These continue to be moving targets with everybody, as with all of our neighbors, as they're having these discussions as well. But this was, as of when we posted this last night, the most current schedule for other communities. And again, as with what we've proposed here this morning, we are in line with the majority of the neighboring communities and the services we're providing.
Okay, Mark, thank you. I have a question on this as well. I think this is helpful, I think, for us to explain to the public. I'm sure there's folks that are watching this that are frustrated, either because they think we're doing too much or they think we're doing too little. And I think it's important that we point out that this is a very progressive program where we're turning the light, as opposed to flipping it on, twisting it a little bit. So, for example, there might be some folks that will say, "Hey, I've got a neighborhood pool, across the street from me or around the corner, and it's been my go-to place, every summer that I've lived here for X number of years. I'm frustrated that I'm driving by what appears to be a perfectly good facility, and I can't get to use it this summer. Why are we, Mark? Why are we only using 2 and then 4 pools? If this is a safe activity, why not open it up to all of the pools? And I know the answer, but I want you to say it. Well, go ahead.
Mayor, when we went through this process initially and we looked at opportunity and the economic impact as well as the health realities and where we were headed with this back in March, the city made the decision that we would lay off our part-time staff, including our lifeguards, our site supervisors, and others. We are now in the process, as things have progressed and changed, and the demand for these services and these facilities to reopen, we are now ramping up those services to restaff what we can. But there's still an economic, as you discussed previously and earlier in the study session, as you reviewed the agenda, there's still an economic reality of the impact this is having to the city. So while we're trying to provide limited services and ramp up as fast as we can, this is also an opportunity for us, hopefully, to save on some expenses for this summer and then come back and stronger, quite frankly, and next year as we move forward. This is and as it's progressed quickly, we also had some other, we accelerated some other repairs so we could get those done this summer in some facilities so they aren't done while they were empty, and it's a better time to do that work from a contractor standpoint and pricing standpoint when they were available to replaster and work on some other things. So that is happening sooner than later as well, based on where we thought we were headed originally.
So there are some practical limitations here with regard to the availability of cleaning supplies, the availability to onboard staff again that was let go initially when we didn't know if we could have a program at all. And then obviously there's the health concerns as this chart indicates. I think Mesa is really on the more progressive side of things in terms of trying to open facilities up in comparison, the timing and the number of facilities compared to some of our neighbors. But if there's an optimistic scenario that unfolds this summer, and I don't know if it's realistic to think that's what's going to happen or not, but if we have a good experience with this initial rollout, and if it appears that it can be justified from a public health perspective, is there the potential that will open more facilities and have more programs available later in the summer?
We will continue to evaluate, as you all are well. This is a rapidly changing situation, and the minute we walk away from here, there'll be new information out there, and we're continuing to adjust as fast as we can. So we'll continue to evaluate and work with the community and the city manager's office on opportunities as they present themselves to offer more to the community.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And again, thank you. I know you and your staff have worked literally around the clock on this, and it's much appreciated. Mr. Heredia and then Mr. Luna.
Hey, Mark, thank you for the information. Are we doing anything differently on sanitation wise? Are we adding more hand sanitizer stations? Are we adding signage like many other grocery stores, or are encouraging social distancing? Can you talk a little bit more on what, in addition, are we adding to these facilities to promote kind of sanitation and kind of the other things that we want them to do during this time?
Thank you, Mayor, Council Member. Yes, we will increase signage. We're looking at, much like as you see in the stores, on the floor, the markers to remind social distancing. We'll continue to, we're working now to get those ordered and in stock and installed. We have a team out there now measuring and preparing to install plexiglass barriers for our cashiers and service points of entry. And as the mayor mentioned, we're continuing to push the supply chain to get us additional hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies so we can keep up with more frequent cleans in between as we transition the different users in and out of the facilities. So we're pushing that supply chain to make sure that we have those supplies available and readily available to keep up with the opening of the facilities. And then again, the spacing and social distancing, we'll get staff back here as fast as we can. As I was flipping when you were asking about hours, we have a pretty detailed document that outlines step by step, and we'll get staff trained on the social distancing, how you can accomplish that, the recommendations, how you approach people to have that conversation, as well as making sure that they have the PPE themselves when they're encountering the public.
Another question, Mark. If we do have somebody that tests positive and they use our facilities, what's the plan in us? Do we shut down the facility, or have you all discussed kind of those plans as far as somebody coming in and having tested positive?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Heredia. Yes, so that's exactly why for those where we're doing rentals of facilities, those user groups, that's part of what we're asking them the plan to include in their plan. How are they going to notify us so that we can take the proper action? As a city team, we are working with our safety services group to have an escalation plan in place that clearly outlines the protocol based on symptoms versus a positive test, and how do we react and what direction do we go, and kind of flow charting that out based on if it's symptoms, if it's a positive diagnosis, and what is it, a closure, is it how deep of a cleaning is it, or is it just a simple sanitation and a minimal closure? So we are, those are all the plans that we've been feverishly working on behind the scenes for not just these facilities, but all of the city's facilities.
Thank you. Mr. Luna, did you have a question?
Yeah, actually, Mr. Heredia asked the question, so I appreciate the question. But do we risk any liability if somebody contracts the coronavirus and suggests that we did not sanitize correctly? And is the city of Mesa liable for somebody if somebody should catch the virus?
Mr. Smith's looking at me and I'm looking at him, so.
Mayor and council member, there's always a possibility. As you know, plaintiffs' attorneys are always looking for opportunities to sue the city. We have a number of cases, and so we're doing everything possible to minimize the exposure. There's also a qualified immunity on certain park facilities and uses, and so because there's obviously just, setting aside COVID, there's a certain risk when you utilize certain park facilities, and so the state statute has a qualified immunity for some of those facilities. So we'll always endeavor to mitigate the risk.
So Mayor and Council, if you recall, even before COVID came along, there were other health concerns about being in public pools that we've always had to deal with that will still be real, that we have to watch out for. So, but more than ever, that's why you're probably going to hear some of the groups complaining about the number of hours that are available because there's not as many hours. Well, we're taking the hours in 4 pools and trying to divide that up, but there's a lot of time in between where we're having to do a lot of cleaning that we would have been available for programming. So that's where it's really going to impact. And so our commitment is to keep our employees safe. We've made that commitment to them, and then to create a safe environment for everybody to come into. And as long as we have the cleaning supplies to do that, we'll be able to stay open. But at some point, if that becomes problematic, we'll have to look at what other options we have.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris and Mark, I was thinking about, Mark, you've mentioned several times about drawing PPE from fire. I know fire is having to supply PD with a lot of the mask type inventory. And I don't know what type of masking if you're going to use for the aquatics program, but I just want to make sure that fire has the capacity to deliver the PPE because I do know that we have a city warehouse that can also stock these items. And so if you're drawing from 2 different warehousing plans, I understand that, but I don't want to have our firefighters and police officers get behind on having the adequate PPE protection, and then whomever else, they're supplying PPE to. So I know you're going to take that into your plan, but that's just one of my thoughts as I've listened to your presentation.
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, the reason that's happening now is because for a period of time, all our inventory that was not specific to public safety was sent to public safety. And so everything that was coming into the city went to public safety as the first priority. Now what's happened in order for us to open these facilities, we're going back to public safety and saying, okay, what is the amount you need to have in place? And so I think we've established they want to have at least 30 days for their needs. And I think that's where we're creating the stop. And so anything above that, that's what we're able to then disperse back to the rest of the city programs. Without doing that, we have to push these deadlines out further until we have that supply. That same topic is impacting our ability to open up not parks and recreation facilities, but all facilities. Before we can bring employees back into the workplace, we have to be assured that we have the cleaning supplies. So we're having that discussion about the inventory that we have, regardless of where it sits, making sure public safety has the priority of their 30-day inventory. But after that, we're having to redisperse that back to the other departments if we want to be open for parks, recreations, aquatics, and even at some point libraries, and then at some point even other city facilities, because we can't open those facilities until we have that cleaning supply. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and I get that. I know you're very diligent on it and resourcing that. So I just again want to make sure that we have multiple sources to draw our PPE in to protect our employees, not only on the public safety side, but also on the aquatics or whatever program like you've talked about. And then obviously purchasing more through our resources and for our respective departments and keeping our inventory satisfactory. Again, so that we can deliver our public safety that we do every day, that's done every day. And I guess it depends on the type of masks, if any are used in the respective programs. So thank you. I know you're diligent on it. It's just one of my thoughts. So thank you.
Okay, council, any additional questions or comments on this item?
I got a question.
Jeremy.
Mark, thanks for the presentation. My question is in regards to determining if this reopening actually works. So what metrics are we going to put in place to, say, like if we open something up and there becomes an outbreak in a specific area, is there anything that we're monitoring in which we're going to revert what we're doing and start closing things back down?
Mayor, council member, obviously, if we start to see those concerns and an outbreak or for one facility or a certain, it starts to come back as a wider throughout the community as a whole, we'll obviously come back and discuss those with you before we make any decisions and let you know what's happening and seek your guidance.
Okay, so are we just going to play it by ear at this point, or do we have predetermined? And I guess that's an overall, I guess, just policy question. Is there a certain number of outbreaks, a certain number of deaths, a certain amount of increase? Is there any predetermined metrics that we'll be monitoring, or are we just going to take it on a case-by-case basis?
So, Mayor and Council, really what triggered all this for us is the decision by the governor to begin opening things up. So we're, in many ways, this is just a rollout from what we received from the governor's office, and the fact that once he made the announcements about gymnasiums and pools, automatically we were under tremendous pressure from all these groups to open up. And so we've tried to respond appropriately and expeditiously. So I think that those kind of standards are not something we track to a degree in Mesa, although I'll tell you, our numbers show that Mesa probably has some of the highest virus impacts of any city on a ratio than any others. But we're really following what the governor tells us to do and what he allows throughout the state. But if the council feels that there needs to be a different metric than what the governor's using, we're open to it. But we have not established any independent metrics than what you hear the governor and the state health officials using. That is, we're following their lead.
Okay, so I understand. So we're basically just going to take it from what comes down from the state level. I guess from my perspective, the only thing, that I would be concerned about is actually, I believe the data is available on a zip code by zip code basis, right? So, I almost think that the virus has to be managed more at a, for lack of a better word, like a micro geographic level rather than just a blanket, I think, Thompson's district out in Southeast Mesa, where there lacks any type of density for the most part, is going to be significantly different than downtown Mesa, where you have a mass transit system, and bus routes running all the time. So I'm not opposing what we're doing here. I'm just suggesting that we keep a close eye on things as we open back up.
We can do that. We've actually started running those that analysis by zip code, as you referred to, and we can share with you the ratios by population, what that looks like. So we can start including that. I know I've asked the fire departments to start tracking that, so we can start sharing that with you in the update.
Okay, great. And my other question is in regards to my understanding is there was that 2-phase layoff period that we went through where we laid off employees that were directly impacted by closures, and then the next phase was just general employees. So are we actually bringing back at this point the employees that were laid off, or are these all seasonal employees and nobody has been affected at this point, and these are all just going to be new employees?
Oh, no, these are employees that were laid off. That was our policy, that if they were laid off because of a particular closing, in this case, pools, they would be brought back once we open those up. This is just happening really about a month earlier than where we had, the discussion we had at the beginning was we were going to have this discussion at the end of May, 1st of June. So we're just, but the intent was from the beginning that all of those seasonal employees and part-time employees would be brought back as we ramped up. There were some our full-time employees that have been laid off that are not in the Parks, Recreation, and Library, but were in the arts and cultural area, which we don't expect that those will come online till much later in the year.
And if I can echo that, it just begin with the limited amount of facilities we're opening. It's not all the staff that we'll be bringing back. It'll be based on the need of the facilities. We're full-time staff where we need additional part-time staff to help the full-time staff in those cases. And then we'll continue to ramp up as things progress throughout and we open more facilities and return programs.
So I guess my question then goes into from the perspective, did we give severance to these employees, and will we be somehow taking the severance back in order to offer them their job? Like, what does that process look like for the employees?
So, yeah,
I assume they were given severance. I don't know the answer to the question.
Mayor and Council, for seasonal part-time employees, there was not severance, and so that's not. We considered that that's why, according to our policy, when we go through reduction in workforce, it first starts with seasonal part-time, and then and we move up from there. So it's the full-time benefited employees that are receive severance and their payout for sick leave and vacation time. And the only positions where that's taken place, again, as I said, is in arts and culture, just because in accordance with their plan, they don't expect that decision to bring back those programs that will need those employees will be until the end of the year.
Okay, great. And my last question is in regards to the PPE that we've already been discussing. And this question, I may have missed it if this question was already answered, but what will we be mandating that employees use PPE, whether it's face masks or gloves, or do we have a policy in which we're mandating what employees do, or are we leaving it up to their own discretion?
I think, no, Mayor, Councilmember Whitaker, in these cases where they're interacting and they're not working solo, we're going to direct them to how to use and when to use the PPE. So if they're teaching a class, Aquatics is a great example. We found a supplier that has waterproof masks that are made out of swimsuit material that are still breathable. You can talk through it, hear through it. So if they're in the water, we'll ask them to wear that. If they're walking on the deck, we'll ask them to wear a mask. If they're sitting in the chair where they're elevated and higher and separated, not necessarily. If they're a cashier, then we're going to ask them to wear PPE where they're interacting directly with the public. If it's a back office person and they're on their break or whatever the case is, not necessarily. It's up to them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark.
Mr. Thompson.
Mark or Mayor or Chris, we haven't talked about reopening some of the programs at the Mesa Arts Center, like the glass blowing or the different type of classes there. Are we looking at doing anything there on a limited or appointment-based process where you have a limited number of people that can come in and do the pottery or do the glass blowing or do the arts type programs? And then I just want to make sure too that we're not letting COVID really control our lives, because I mean, and not to get into the debate of flu deaths versus and flu cases versus COVID cases and COVID deaths, but we're going to be coming back into flu season soon. And how will you distinguish between someone being ill from the flu and someone being ill from COVID? Because if someone has the flu, I mean, it's obviously contagious, just like COVID. So are we going to shut everything down and scrub from top to bottom just because someone has the flu. So those are just a couple of things. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, Mayor, Council Thompson, we're not ready to, I just haven't had a chance to get into that discussion or thought. We're right now focused on these recreational programs that are active today, or would be otherwise active today. We're still we're having discussions with our department directors, the employees, just about even coming back to city offices and what that might look like and how we'll interface with the employee or with the public. We can have Cindy begin thinking about programs, classes. It's just some of that space is pretty small. And not only the logistics, but the economics of only having 10 people in a class, does that really work for the instructor as far as the cost? So we'll have those discussions. Right here in these programs where we have them either outdoors on fields or in the pools, we felt like this was a much easier path. When we talk about programs that are, and as Mark said, even the programs he's going to bring inside facilities are going to be very limited. And so I think that would apply even to the arts and culture classes. But right now, nobody's talking about mass gatherings and museums or theaters right now, and that would have to be a subsequent phase. So we'll start looking at what that would look like. But again, at some point, when you figure out you only have a few people coming in, and the cost to accommodate even just a few people and the cleaning and having staff there and the exposure to staff, all those things have to be considered. So whether we like it, it has had a dramatic effect on what we do, and we'll just, we have to keep the safety of our employees first and foremost.
Good. And Mark, thank you for the presentation. You did a good job of putting all this together.
Thank you, Mr. Luna.
Hey, Mark, I want to thank you too for the presentation. I know you have a tough job ahead of you to try to open these facilities. But my question to you, so you're going to open these facilities, you're working hard with your staff. How are you going to run the food program at the same time? I feel badly for you. How are you going to do that? You're just one person.
Yeah, Mr. Brady told me he had an extra 24 hours a day to my schedule, so there should be time for both now. I'm meeting with Carrie and Natalie. We have a phase-out plan for our staff that's being reallocated back into their normal jobs to provide those recreation and program services to the community. And we're going to start vetting that through this afternoon on what that phase-out plan looks like, and the next group come in to take off where we've set things going.
So, but Mayor and Council, to Mark's point, Mark and his staff have done an incredible job of helping with food security in our community, which, as you know, is the #1 concern of our residents and continues to be for many. But what we're going to have to do, two things we're going to have to do is, one, look at probably scaling down those programs a little bit, but we're also going to try to find, we're already looking and finding other employees throughout the organization that can assist and maybe taking over some of those responsibilities over the next couple of weeks. But there has to be some period of transition for that to take place. So it's going to be a combination of reducing what we had originally anticipated as far as food distribution through the community. That may be a little bit less, but at the same time, we've set up some important programs, created schedules, created anticipation of our support. And so we're going to bring in additional staff. But I'll tell you, Mark still has an amazing staff that's out there and will continue to be out there for some time because there's a lot of things that they do, whether it's the convention center or other areas, that they can be committed to this for quite a while.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to add a comment that, the question was asked, what's the city's role here now that the governor has lifted the stay-at-home order? And I think our role has become much more prominent. Now that these activities are not prohibited as a result of state action, we are the front lines of regulating these activities and deciding, what's appropriate and what's not, and what's safe and what's not. So that's a very sobering responsibility. I appreciate the approach that we're taking here. This is a very guarded, very conservative approach to rolling back some of these services. And to Mr. Whitaker's point, if there is, I think we need to be very sensitive to the public health consequences of this. And if we see that there is incidents of outbreak of illness, we need to respond very aggressively in those situations, because the state has stepped aside, and now it's the city of Mesa that is deciding how and when and where we're going to do these things, and how and when our facilities are going to be used. So that's a responsibility that I think we need to own up to. I think there are things that we can do, as we've talked about here for the last hour or so, in a helpful way, that we can bring some economic activity and some quality of life back to our community. But again, it's got to be done with public health as a paramount concern, and what dictates how and when we do what we do. So thank you, Mark, for the very thoughtful proposal that you've made for how we re-engage council. This is agendized as an action item. So I think the question is, do we, as a consensus, agree or have concerns with what's been presented? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I agree with what's been presented, but I just want to also, again, ensure that we're using caution and not overly freaking out and shutting everything down if there's a flu outbreak. We've ridden the wave of flu epidemics and pandemics in the past and came out okay. And I want to make sure that we don't, shoot ourselves in the foot on a flu outbreak by coming in and shutting everything down again. So just issuing caution there to be able to hopefully distinguish between the two. But other than that, I love the guidelines, and I'm all for moving it forward.
Mr. Luna.
Yes, I think we need to take a measured approach. We still have COVID. We have to deal with that. We have to make sure that we're protecting our public. And if something we do have an outbreak, we have a responsibility to make sure that we protect our public. But I think what Mark has suggested, I would support that recommendation.
Thank you. Council, comments. I'm going to say that the consensus is to again thank staff for the work that's gone into this, and to approve proceeding in the way that Mark has indicated. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda for this meeting is item 2B. That's to hear a presentation and discuss a new library pickup drop-off program and an overview of the Mesa Cares Community Resource Call Center.
So Mayor, Heather Wolf is here, and she'll be kind of following Mark's example. She'll be wearing two hats in this presentation, both as the library director and as the lead of our call center, Mesa Cares call center. So we wondered why she's here to give you an update on both of those.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for having me here today. I know you have a very busy agenda this morning, but I'm excited to tell you about some things that are happening at the library, and we'll talk about the library first. So while our buildings have been closed, our databases and the largest digital collection in the state have always been available 24/7 to our users through mesalibrary.org. In addition, our librarians are creating new virtual content on a regular basis. This includes virtual storytime programs that can be watched on our social media. And on our website, we actually have a whole new section. It's called At Home Activities for Kids. And here you can find many lessons that parents can use at home to explore different topics with their children, and that's preschool through 2nd grade. For adults, we also are currently providing resume consultation over email, and we hope to add some more virtual content for our adults in June. Some of our online resources, such as lynda.com, you do need a library card, so we've made those library cards available online. Once you get your library card number and a PIN, you are ready to go, and you can access everything for free. Oh, whoops. And I'm sorry, I didn't change the slide, but that was the slide that just went with what I said. It's been a long time since I've been up here in front of everybody. Okay, Now I want to talk about our park and pickup service. We started this because while it is very easy to say that there is a tremendous amount of content available to our residents digitally, we know that there are challenges to access for many in our community. And parents are a little hesitant right now to encourage even more screen time when their children are using their devices for classroom and research activities. And I'm also hearing daily, sometimes multiple times a day, from many residents who still really enjoy reading an actual book. So our staff has spent the last few weeks researching best practices to keep both our customers and our staff safe during hold pickup. And so we've called this service Park and Pickup Service. It will begin Tuesday, May 19th, now that the governor has lifted the stay-at-home order. We're gonna start slow and gradual with these morning hours every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, but we will reevaluate in a couple of weeks. So we are trying to keep this very simple. If you've done some of the grocery store pickup services, you'll recognize these steps. We will have parking spaces in each of the 3 library parking lots. There will be signs with a number posted. You call that number, talk to the staff member. They'll check out the books to you over the phone and then bag everything up. You're gonna open your trunk or your back door. Staff member is going to place the items inside. And then once they've stepped away, you can close your trunk, close your back door, and you are ready to go. Similar to Parks and Rec, I do want to thank Fire and Medical. We had sent all of our disinfecting wipes, all of our hand sanitizer, et cetera, to the EOC at the beginning of the closures. So they have stocked us back up so that we can offer this service. All right, so any questions about that new service?
Don't see any.
Okay, so as you know, we have been staffing the Mesa Cares Community Resource Call Center and the library since April 6th. And our focus there is to identify resources and provide up-to-date information to our community over the phone and through the Mesa Cares website. We've helped connect people to resources for food, utilities, rent, housing, healthcare, internet access, and volunteer opportunities. People have actually called us looking to find out where they can help in their community. And just yesterday, our staff reunited a family with their lost dog. So it's amazing what we've been able to do in the call center. It is a wide range of needs, and often callers are dealing with more than one issue at a time. So our staff ask lots of questions and they listen. We've had a number of times where a staff person has been on the phone as much as 30 minutes with one person working their way through all of their issues. Just last Friday, a staff member had a woman call. She has been at home by herself all this time, and she saw the number. She wasn't sure if we could help her, but we spent some time talking with her. We realized her primary need was food service delivery. She was a senior, so we were able to offer her several options. And the staff member said that you could just hear her smiling once she realized that there were ways for her to get food safely. So it's been very a positive experience for our staff. On Monday, we expanded our role, and we are now providing assistance specific to the Small Business Reemergence Program. So my slides following are going to be talking about that. For that program, we're not only answering questions about the program and the application online, but we are also preparing applications. I checked the statistics. We only have had to prepare 2 for people over the phone, but that service is available if somebody has challenges to preparing the application online themselves. And additionally, we are reviewing applications for completeness and legibility. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that. If there is missing documentation or information, we call the business owner and let them know what is needed in order to complete their application. These statistics are Wednesday as of 2:30 p.m. I had to pull the statistics in order to finish up the presentation and get that to you all. But as you can see, the call center's been busy. Just as a frame of reference, in the first, from April 6th up until May 10th, we had received 640 calls in the call center. So you can see that once the Small Business Reemergence Program started, the call volume accelerated. By close of business on Wednesday, 57 calls that you see for May 13th had increased to 83, bringing our total for the 3 days to 258 calls. In that time, 276 applications have been submitted, and almost 50% of those had already been verified by call center staff and moved over to economic development. In addition, call center staff placed 213 calls to applicants to alert them to missing documentation or information. And I just wanted to share, we were a little hesitant about that. We weren't sure how people were going to respond, but the feedback when we call has been one of gratitude. The business owners really appreciate, they know that we're already looking at their applications, and while it does mean that they have to submit additional information or information that just wasn't legible when it got to us, they really appreciate knowing that their application was received, we are looking at it, and they're those many steps closer to being reviewed for eligibility. And one additional update on statistics, 266 applications were in English, 8 in Spanish, and as I said, 2 were prepared by the call center staff. So I just wanted to say thank you. The call center could not have started on April 6th or started assisting with the Small Business Reemergence Program on Monday without the hard work and many, many hours, many in the middle of the night hours from a lot of people throughout the city. So I wanted to take a chance to thank these 5 departments specifically: Community Services, Development Services, Downtown Transformation. I know it's not a huge department, but thank you, Jeff. Do It, and Economic Development. They've all been by our side every step of the way, and we really appreciate their support. And I also want to note that with just 5 Spanish speakers in the library staff working the call center, we also have received help from other departments. Staff throughout the city have volunteered, and if we're too busy in the call center on the bilingual line, we've been able to shift calls over to those volunteers. So it's been a true citywide effort, and I just want to thank everyone for helping us with this. Do you have questions?
Thank you very much, Heather. Council, questions for Heather? Yes, let's start with Councilmember Duff and then Mr. Freeman.
Do we know how many Spanish applications were admitted for the small business program?
Thank you, Councilmember Duff and Mayor. Yes, we had so far just 8 that have been submitted in Spanish.
Thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor and Heather. Heather, I just want to go back to the library. I think that's awesome. You're doing the park and pickup because I know people who are driving to other municipalities for their park and pickup they want to read a hard book. And that, again, the screen time is something that parents are monitoring. So, and even adults would like to read a hard copy. So I appreciate you reallocating your employees and getting that taken care of. The Mesa Cares program, I think, is great. I'm trying to promote that as much as I can. And utilizing your staff to help with these call center and exercising the support of the supporting agencies and departments allows us to reach out to more. So again, thank you for the information. I find it very exciting that we can get this out to our businesses in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luna.
Heather, thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you have bilingual staff that can respond to questions from our Spanish-speaking community members. And do you know exactly how many we've had so far? Maybe you may have mentioned it, but could you remind me again how many individuals have called, asked for assistance relative to the Mesa Cares program? And also, I think you said 2 people have gone through the application process in Spanish. And the other thing that I appreciate that other staff members, in addition to the Mesa Care staff that is reporting directly to you, but there are an additional a slate of employees that are providing bilingual assistance. Did you get the question?
I think so. Mayor,
okay.
Councilmember Luna, thank you. So to recap, since Monday, the call center has received 258 calls, and that was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They opened at 8, so more calls have come in since then. In that time, 276 applications were submitted, and almost 50% of those had been verified and moved to the next step of the process. In addition, our call center staff placed 213 calls out to business owners seeking additional information because the application was either missing information or information was not legible. And then as far as the number of calls in Spanish, I'm sorry, I don't have that number with me, but I'm sure I can get that to you. But we have received 8 applications in Spanish.
Great, Heather. Thank you for working really hard on that project. I know it's been a real challenge, but I appreciate the hard work, especially when it comes to reaching out to our Spanish speakers in the city of Mesa. So thank you.
Mr. Heredia.
Yeah, hi, Heather. Just on the library aspect, you mentioned the digital library and the virtual content. Are we planning, as you mentioned, that a lot of students have been using screen time, but also school is ending this week or 2 for many kids. Are we planning to maybe outreach a little bit more or on the virtual content and the digital library, wondering on the utilization right now, and then if we plan to increase a push to let parents know about what we have to offer within our library as far as that content online.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Heredia. So yes, summer reading program would normally be kicking off at the end of May, and we are still kicking off summer reading program. It'll be completely online. It has been for the last couple of years where you tracked your minutes of reading and did those sorts of kind of clerical activities online. And then we supported it with in-house programs of hundreds of children and those sorts of things. So this year, that part will be missing, but we are still working very hard to promote reading over the summer so that we can prevent that summer slide. Our digital library, I want to emphasize for parents, those titles are not just adult titles. There are children's books, teen books, children's audio, teen audio. There's all ages are supported through our Greater Phoenix Digital Library and our cloud library, which might be under RP Digital. We also have databases, again. Ms. Humblebee's Academy is great for our preschoolers. We have Tumble Books that helps those who are learning to read. And then there's an older version of Tumble Books for older children and teens that even includes the popular anime and other things that are good with the tween and teen groups. So there's, again, lots of stuff out there, and our social media and our website, we're doing everything we can to promote that. So thank you for asking, Councilmember Heredia. I appreciate the opportunity to remind people that that is there for them.
I would like to see if we can even further push out. I don't know if we can, based on not opening libraries, of course, based on health concerns, but since we have all this content, all these things available, and as schools programming ends, spreading the word even further as a resource is gonna be helpful for parents. Noting, I have 3 little ones, and it's tough to keep them busy at times, and having them to read a book on a tablet, or if folks have one, or online, could be an opportunity for them to use our library services.
Okay, thank you, Heather. I have a couple of comments and quick questions. Number one, I just want to join in thanking you. You, like Mr. Hirschberg, have been playing a major role in our city's response to COVID, and been wearing multiple hats. I really appreciate the way you and your staff have stepped up and been manning the call centers. So thank you for really being the front lines in engaging the public on behalf of the city. Library services, much like the pool services we were talking about a few minutes ago, are really 2 of the staples that Mesa families rely on during the summer to get through the summer. So I'm excited to see that we are going to be available in spite of the challenges that we have this summer. As I was reading through the slides, though, to me, it seemed, I assume we're not going to ask families to drive to the parking lot, then call us and tell us what book they want, and then somebody goes and looks for it and walks out and puts it in a bag. I mean, that's more like McDonald's than the grocery store pickup. I assume that but we need to do a good job of letting families know. You can't browse through the library now, but you can browse online. And your kids can pick out, the stack of books that they want, and they can pre-order those. Could you just walk us through that a little bit more? Because I think it's a little unclear as to, beginning next Tuesday, where do Mr. Heredia's, 3 kids go online to figure out, what books they want to pre-order to pick up?
Mayor, so after this presentation, there will be an email going out to all of our library card holders, letting them know about the new service. And you are correct. You do need to go online and place a hold. And then once you receive the notification, and I'm sorry, I was nervous and I went fast through the presentation. So once you receive the notification, then you can go to the library during our park and pickup hours. And we know it's limited right now, but we wanted to start somewhere and then evaluate what days and times are best. But so again, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Once you've got that notification saying that you have a hold, you can go to the branch that you normally use, park in the designated space, call that number, staff will look up your items, you give them your library card number, they check them out to you, and then they bring it out to you in a bag and place them in your car. And again, we're trying to keep it simple and safe.
Great. So the way that process starts is by going to mesalibrary.org with your library card number.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, Council. Yes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Duff.
Yes, and talking about that, I just had a couple of questions. So can you send someone in your place, or can it be, do you have to be the card holder in order to pick up the book, or can you send someone out for you? And the second question is, can you make a phone call in just in case browsing or internet is not available to you?
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, so as long as you have the person's library card number, you can pick up the items, because you'll be telling us the library card number over the phone when you park. So yes, in that sense, you can pick up for somebody else. As far as calling in to make a reservation, to reserve a book, right now, we are not answering the library's direct number because staff are all on the call center line. So the people who are helping out with the park and pickup are the only people who are not helping out in the call center. So right now, we're not answering 644-3100, which would normally be the line that people would call to reserve a book over the phone. We are hoping that as the small business reemergence program cycles to its completion, that we'll be able to shift some staff from the call center to start answering our library number, because now we have all this great experience in a call center.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Council. Any other questions for Heather? Okay, thank you. I don't think this item calls for any action from the Council, so thank you, Heather. We look forward to participating in the summer reading program virtually. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is, it's a lengthy item, but I'll just read it. Hear a presentation on the city's existing programs for homeless prevention and services, and hear a presentation, discuss, and provide direction on staff recommendations for future federal funding allocations to supplement these existing homeless programs, and provide direction on 2 new proposed program concepts in response to COVID-19. 1, Operation Off the Streets for everyone's health and safety, and 2, emergency homeless housing through asset acquisition. All right, I think that probably ends the meeting. That was a long introduction. Mr. Brady, who's going to help us out with this one?
We have quite a team here, Mayor, that we want to present to you. We have Natalie Lewis and Ed Wessing from the police department. So we'll turn it over to them to present this information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We also have Aaron Rain, who's here in the back, in case there are questions, and because I know you all know him and know the amount of work that he puts into our homeless work. But as the mayor just read, and we'll try to be really efficient with your time today, we are here to present some new program concepts. But before we do that, what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes to reset the context of the services and the investments that have been made already with existing dollars, and that the City Council has already approved, and that these programs are in accordance with your wishes and with your priorities. For example, helping to prevent evictions or future homelessness. So there's 4 main categories, and again, I'll go through them as quickly as possible. Homeless prevention is our priority. The programs that you have allocated funding to so far equal about 5,220 households that would be served. And the programs include the eviction prevention, utility assistance, and vouchers that Mesa United Way would be using for emergency shelter. The second category has to do with housing and vouchers. And for that, we have allocated dollars that help 284 households. And some of the programs there include rapid rehousing, which you'll recall is housing that is temporary, but it's really more like 9 months to a year. And so we see this as a really good tool to help people who maybe lost their jobs during COVID and to help them get back on their feet. We're also looking at and have supported some permanent supportive housing. And we also have our traditional vouchers, which is the Veterans Affairs Support Housing vouchers, and project-based vouchers at both La Mesita and at Escobedo. And then lastly, we have set aside $1.5 million to have additional conversations in the region for some kind of regional solution to homelessness as we move forward and and we're in the post-COVID time period. The third item or category is emergency shelters. We have funded enough and different providers for 951 of our households to be assisted. That could be just single men, that could be families, women, or domestic violence victims. And then the final category is outreach and wraparound services. And in this category, we'll be connecting up to 20,000 different people or families. And this is where we'll be giving meals and showers. We'll be helping people get into shelters, job support, medical services, crisis intervention, and in all different age groups. And it's also where we have an additional 500 Meals on Wheels being provided, because when we had conversations with council, serving our seniors as a vulnerable population was also a priority. So with all of that funding, it comes to about $6.9 million that have been approved and will be launching in the near future. And so you know, we have more to come. We have $1.1 million more coming in Emergency Solutions Grant. We believe we will be able to start using those dollars in early June. Our goal and recommendation is to use these dollars and to supplement some of the existing programs that I just reviewed that are already showing progress and success and are working, so that we can very quickly and efficiently get those dollars appropriated and out to the community. We also have $2.2 million in community development block grants. We are still awaiting guidance on any particular rules from HUD that might be released during this time period, so we're awaiting that guidance. But again, our recommendation would be to just contribute these dollars to existing programs if and when we are able to do so. So on to the new programs, and I'm here today, as Chris said, with our Assistant Chief Wessing. The police department has worked hard to figure out a new program. We've budgeted $500,000 for it, and we have named it Operation Off the Streets for everyone's health and safety. This is the first program from a homeless perspective that we will be using that $90 million pot of dollars and allocating it. It's very clear in the guidance that we can use the dollars for this purpose. And so we have created this because there's a lot of challenges out there. We've heard from several of you. We've heard from the community. They're concerned about urban camping. They're concerned about unstable populations. There's more in our community today than there has been, or at least in a visual way. We know that the Ninth Circuit Court has passed Martin v. Boise, so we need to make sure we have ample shelter space in order to enforce urban camping. We know that the summer heat is closing in on us and that there is limited areas for homeless to be at. They are sometimes closed. And we also know that the homeless population is a vulnerable, at-risk population, in particular during COVID. So for us, it's very important to get them off the streets so that they can stay healthy and our community can stay healthy as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Chief Wessing.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We are keenly aware of the challenges that our communities face with the homeless population. Specifically, it has increased over the past 2 months related to COVID as normal resources available have been shut down. Other areas that they typically would be are also shut down. And so it's happening not only in our parks, it's happening in other public areas. Wherever the community typically would gather, we are seeing an increase of our homeless population, not only from here locally, but also from out of state. This is a public safety issue as well as a health issue related to COVID. What we are planning on doing is taking some highly trained officers, particularly from our street crimes units, our community action officers who I believe each of you work with closely in your particular areas of the city, and we're gonna ask them to do some focused enforcement operations. And this is specifically rated to our homeless population in those areas that we designate as hotspots for these issues. We are gonna ask, and this is gonna involve about 40 different members of the department. They will not be pulled from their normal functions in their divisions. And it's in a phased approach. Our first phase actually began this week, and we are actually seeing successes already. If you could go on to the next slide. One of the things that I wanted to focus is that we have obtained the proper PPE for these officers that will be asked to go into areas, and they will not be able to maintain their social distancing with the individuals that they're contacting. We are confident that the supply of PPE we have is sufficient for this operation. Their previous mission, as I stated before, in their divisions will not be compromised. In the event that their division has a particular need, there will always be the option to return to their normal function, and other areas will backfill. What we're hoping to do is provide weekly and monthly reporting to show not only the number of contacts, but hopefully demonstrate some of the success stories, either with cleanups in areas of the community or people accepting resources and moving into that system. I mentioned a little bit earlier, street crimes, community action officers, and our bike units are going to be the primary enforcement component of this operation. That will include their supervisors. Obviously, we are working closely with the city, CBI's homeless liaisons. We're triaging mental health issues, so we've asked our community our CRT team as well to be included on an as-needed basis. There's a two-pronged approach in our enforcement operations. Obviously, if we encounter service-resistant members of this segment of the population, it's difficult to get them into resources, but when they are willing to accept services, we will be working through the community court system as well as with Aaron Rain and the city resources that have been designated for this operation. Our initial plan is to have a very heavy presence in the first 30 days and then evaluate at that point designated hotspots throughout the city. It's going to become part of these units' daily mission within their patrol districts at that point in time. It'll also be part of the daily mission of the patrol officers that are assigned in their districts when available to monitor these areas for us. The idea of this operation is to rally resources from around the city to areas all over the city. And what I mean by that is if we have a need to move the resources to the west side, we'll move those resources, and as we need to move it to the east side, we can rally a significant number of personnel. Following the 60-day phase, we will move forward in a maintenance phase, and as things pop up, we will address those as quickly as possible and assign resources to deal with those specific to this operation. I mentioned this just a minute ago, and you'll see the two-pronged approach with our contact members. Obviously, when there is reasonable suspicion or probable cause to contact, it goes into two prongs. If they're accepting of services, that's our route that we will take. Unfortunately, in some cases, they may be resistant to services, and we have been working with not only the municipal court, to reinvigorate the community court model due to the COVID pandemic, and other of our regional partners to make sure we're able to take the appropriate enforcement action if in fact that's what it leads to, including booking those individuals for those criminal violations that we may encounter.
One other thing to add for the mayor and city council, as part of that service acceptance model, we're looking to lease up to 100 rooms, hotel rooms in Mesa. We've chosen some hotels one that is on the west side of the city, one that's on the east side of the city, so that there's plenty of diversity there. We'll have police officers on duty to help with security, and we'll be working very closely, Aaron Rain in particular, with community bridges to make sure that we're providing stabilization types of services, including connecting these residents to Feeding Mesa and the program that we have there. So at this point, does council have any questions on this particular new program before we move into the second one?
Yeah, I see up your hands. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Duff, and then Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Where do I begin? You know, I've never been a fan of utilizing sworn officers, you know, to go out. I mean, when we started talking about this program, you know, a few months ago, I wasn't a fan then, and I'm still not a fan of using sworn officers that otherwise could be on the streets, functioning daily, not only in patrolling and fighting crime, but, you know, keeping our community safe. Whether, you know, whether they're bike officers or special units or what have you. You know, I wish there was another way of utilizing the non-sworn individuals in the city, and I'm okay, you know, if you're going to have one or two sworn officers that are joining in with, let's say, a code compliance or some other department where they're going out into an urban camping type environment, you know, that they have a couple of sworn officers with them. But to me, the full cost of a sworn officer, it seems to me their time could be better utilized when we're paying that much money versus, you know, really all they're doing is doing the same thing that really the navigators are doing, right? They're going out and finding homeless people and then trying to get them the services that they need. And I don't necessarily know that we need sworn officers to be able to do that. Now, I do agree that we need sworn officers to ensure the safety of the individuals that are doing the outreach. But I mean, you have 49 members and lieutenants that are part of this enforcement group. I just think that's a bad utilization of personnel, especially when Councilmember Luna and my district both are still underserved in patrol officers. That's it.
Mayor and
Thank you.
Thompson.
Ms. Duff.
Oh, okay. I have a few questions regarding the hot spots. Will you be telling us where those hot spots are by district so that we are aware of the attention given to that area? And I'm particularly concerned about Pioneer Park is one, but downtown as small businesses reopen. I have a few points, so I don't know if we'll run through all of them or we would take one by one. And are we no longer concerned about the concentration of the high-risk homeless in shelters? There was a pullback initially as the there was an outbreak of gathering too many homeless and corralling them into shelters because we felt that could create some kind of outbreak situation, which would be kind of like a nursing home situation, which would be very difficult to control. And are any of the services, do we know, at the homeless services and shelter, are they handing out masks so we can get masks to the homeless who choose to use those to, when they're on the streets and out and about, they can be more safe among the population and among others? And I was wondering if the crime has overall in the police department continued to trend down. And I know we've been in a shutdown. It might change as we begin opening up, but I'm just wondering where you are in the statistics. And that's my notes.
So let's have Ed answer the question about, I think, the downtown and what you're doing there, and then about your activity level would be good.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Duff, the first question you asked was reference to the hotspots that we identify. Frankly, we get a lot of those hotspots from direct contacts from yourself and other council members already, members of the community. But as we work through this project, any of those that are identified, we'll be reaching out to you individually from the division commanders to make sure you're aware of any particular issues that are happening in your district. And I'm sorry, what was the?
And well, could you talk about the downtown? And you talked about the walking patrols. I think that'd be interesting for the council member.
One of the components that we want to implement in this process, particularly with the opening of the businesses and restaurants here in the downtown areas, to establish a walking beat type of a component to the operation. So what you'll see is 1 or 2 uniformed patrol officers walking from business to business, being visible, making contact with those business owners, listening to their concerns related to this particular issue that we're speaking of, going primarily from Country Club to Pioneer Park. We will evaluate the success of that program as part of this operation as we move forward.
And let me just clarify, I think on the last question, I think part of why we're able to do this now, twofold. One, after speaking specifically with the chief, these particular groups of police officers, there is some available time for them right now. The activity level is not quite as it's been in the past. So certainly during this specific time in this emergency, we felt it would be a good time to keep them fully active and deploy them in assisting with this specific program, the surge, if you would, to really address this issue during this pandemic. This is not something we would probably normally be able to keep at this level of effort outside of this, but we think it's justified because of the population we're dealing with, the tendency for them to gather around. It's become more obvious, visible, that they are on many places more visible than it has been in the past. So the police department has offered to assist in redeploying some of their individuals to do this. And frankly, they are the best trained and the best well protected and have the equipment and the resources to assist in this effort. And that's why they have stand this up. And it's just for a period of time. We want to be able to evaluate the success of the program. So that's why we're proposing this program as it is right now.
Well, thank you very much. I can't say enough how thrilled I am, how happy I am to see the attention of having a police officer on the beat walking in downtown to help those businesses reemerge from the shutdown. We've had, of course, as everybody may know, that downtown has been a collector, especially during the shutdown, and there's been little activity. And we want to encourage people to interact in downtown and not be businesses, to know that they and their employees feel safe in their space. So thank you very much. It's very critical at this time, and I appreciate all the efforts.
Thank you. I know Mr. Heredia had a question.
I think the Vice Mayor had something first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. Natalie, you mentioned acquiring a hotel in West Mesa and also East Mesa, and you described the wraparound services for that. Could you where's the location of that? Just cross streets of a hotel in West Mesa? Do you have one, or is that still projected out?
So Mayor and Vice Mayor Freeman, First of all, just to correct you or to clarify, we will not be purchasing these hotels. All we are doing is leasing rooms at this point for the 2-month time period that we're working with the police department. So just to make sure that's clear. I don't have the cross streets and the addresses, and typically we don't like to provide that information just because when we put this type of clientele at that hotel, we want them to have their privacy and safety, and so we really just don't talk about that.
We can provide that offline if you'd like.
Exactly.
Thank you for clarifying that, Natalie. Appreciate it. First of all, I like the program that's being proposed for the police department. You know, I appreciate Kevin's comments, but you know, as firefighters, they reach out. Then not only as paramedics, EMTs, fight fires, mental health, a lot of different capacities. I think our police officers today are trained to handle a multitude of different calls, and this is one of them. That's I think I would like to see the statistics and analytics on this as it proceeds in the future, because we do have hot spots. I mean, yesterday in my travels, I mean, there's, as you know, Natalie and Aaron and others. West Mesa and District 1 and probably all the districts have hotspots that reaching out to our homeless population and extending services is critical, not only to them, but to help them realize that we're here to support them. And I know we could throw every dollar at this, at these different types of programs, but at some point we have to realize that allocating dollars need to be distributed equally throughout different programs. So I'm supportive of this, and I'm grateful that we can take a hard 2 months and use some of our specialized teams out there. And I know they probably don't like it, but at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to reach out to everyone in our community. But thank you, Natalie, and Assistant Chief, I almost call him Commander, but for your oversight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Heredia and then Mr. Luna.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chief and Natalie, Chief Wessing. Wondering how kind of data and analytics play into this. I know through our community core program, we've had a lot of success in the recidivism rates and, you know, costs around, you know, not jailing homeless folks in our system, and, you know, that costs that we used to have. And so how we can, you know, use data and analyze that data for us in our proactive measures, how that actually potentially saves us money in the long term is going to be important as we work on these programs and test out these programs. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit more on you know, our utilization of data to enhance these types of programs moving forward. I believe these are important programs that could save us money. You know, I know we have personnel going out, but like Vice Mayor Freeman said and others, you know, police officers are trained, and I know they also refer through the process to our navigators, and so it's a team effort there. But do you elaborate a little bit more on the data side and how we kind of came up with these types of programs, I guess?
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, I'll start. First of all, our experience with community court and before COVID was that sometimes we're working very hard with someone and they want to get help, and they keep working, they make progress, they finally graduate, and they're still homeless. And so we have had issues in the past with not having capacity of sheltering. So we're excited about this program and this approach to try it, because we can make sure that if somebody does go through our community court process and they are trying to help themselves, become more stable, then we have this ability to put them into a hotel. And the second part that I just want to make sure that you understand is that these hotel rooms are really meant to just be a launch point. We don't want people staying there for a significant amount of time. But what it does do is it helps us wrap them with services and find out what they really need and get them more stabilized and make sure that they're staying healthy during COVID, and to find some other options in the community for either rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, other things that we can do so that when COVID is over, we're not just asking and having these new residents at the hotels back to the streets. We've actually got them into more stable and long-term solutions. So from a statistics perspective, we will be looking at how many of these of our homeless that we contact, how many chose the service side of things, how many chose the resistant side, if they are resistant, how many of those went to our community court, and then once they went into community court, were they housed, and what happened after that. So there will be a lot of data that comes out of this process, and we're excited about it because it really does work well for the COVID time period, but it will help us in the long term with other services and programs that we have.
Mayor and Councilmember Heredia, to add to that, we have and have been a data-driven department for years, and we have been tracking the data. I think that you were specifically referencing to that Natalie just spoke of, specifically rated to the community court model. We really looked at the number of people that were successful in the program and the overall reduction of calls for service and arrests that came out of those individuals who were successful, and it was a significant reduction. So much so that it really encouraged us to realize that we are on the right path with utilizing this model even further. We will be tracking specifically throughout this operation weekly and monthly statistics for both the service-resistant side and those that are able to accept those services. So we will be using those statistics to allocate resources as necessary, whether it's the enforcement side, the education side, or services provided by navigators and other resources through the city.
Thank you very much. Mr. Luna.
Yeah, this is to Natalie. Natalie, so you're going to be providing wraparound services to these individuals that we're going to be housing in the hotel. Are you also working with some of our community nonprofits to support you in this effort with a new leave, with Save the Family, and those kind of community partners, as well as Mesa United Way?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Luna, absolutely. It'll start with the triage through Community Bridges, so they will determine what services are needed. And again, one of the hotels that we're looking at has kitchenettes, and so what we're trying to do is make sure that these individuals can stay isolated to the extent possible, that we can use our Feeding Mesa program to make sure that they receive food and nutrition. So we are doing that, but we have lots of different services, and a lot of them I spoke about before we talked about this project. So the idea too there is to connect into those services that are needed, and that would be other partnerships with Save the Family, Mesa United Way, and others.
So Natalie, are you also going to be working with the health agency to provide COVID testing to these individuals that we're going to be housing?
Yes, Councilmember Luna. The way that works is when the police department, if they see someone that they think is sick or anything like that, immediately they can call a 24/7 number that helps get them connected to Circle the City, so that Circle the City, then we also have transportation for them to get there, so that Circle the City then tests them, make sure they get their medical needs met before we do anything else.
So the other concern I would have is our public safety personnel. We want to make sure that if they come into contact with somebody that could potentially have COVID, how are we ensuring that they're protected and that as well as the homeless individual?
Mayor, Councilmember Luna, we've actually established those protocols very early on into the COVID pandemic. So this will be nothing new for us. If we've identified an individual in this project that we believe to be symptomatic or tells us that they may be infected, we have particular PPE protocols in place for those types of contacts. What we've instructed and provided the PPE to accomplish this is the right PPE that in any time they're making contact with individuals and they're closer than that 6-foot social distance that is recommended, that they are mandated to wear masks, eye protection, and gloves. It's not an option. So we're hoping to prevent and mitigate any potential exposure on the onset. But if during that contact there's a belief that the individual may have been exposed, we do have protocols in place to ensure that that is mitigated as much as possible.
And one follow-up. What if we run into a homeless family? How are we dealing with that, Natalie? Can you maybe talk me through that process?
Yes, thank you. And honestly, I think we are going to run into some homeless families because our officers see them more than we think. And we're also going to be working with the school district because they have connections with these families and can help us at least get a link to them in some way, shape, or form. So one of the hotels that has been selected also has suites so that when there is a family that's in need, there's additional space for them to be there and to stay healthy and get what they need.
Yes, because especially in District 5 and District 6, you're going to find many homeless families. You're going to find several homeless families camping. And so we certainly want to make sure that we protect them, especially if they have children. And so this outreach effort is going to secure their safety and their protection. And I appreciate the fact that you're going to be working with a health partner to do some COVID testing, and as well as providing wraparound services, as well as working with some of our community partners that provide the services on a daily basis.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Duff.
I just had one question on, I love that we're doing the proactive outreach, but let's say they approach a homeless person and they don't want to accept the services, but they're not exactly breaking the law because hanging out on the park or sitting on a park bench someplace is not against the law. So it's, if of their choosing, that they continue to collect in certain areas unless they're breaking the law. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand how we're approaching them and what the outcome will be.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Duff, that's a good question. And our officers are trained specifically in how to deal with exactly what you described. And certainly when you initially contact individuals that you described, it's a consensual stop to speak to them, hopefully to find resources if they're willing to accept them. But if we're not able to establish probable cause that a crime occurred, and we do have several statutes that are enforceable based on the given situation, but if we are not able to establish a reason to enforce a criminal statute, then yes, we cannot force them to leave. We cannot, physically make them move. But we're hoping that with continual contact, some of those individuals may leave on their own and potentially move to an area where it may be more acceptable to remain in what you described.
Good. I really do think that the continual contact and that we're aware of them, they're aware of us, and trying to make that, to get them to accept services, I think is going to be more effective than, having to have a blind eye when they're not breaking the law. So thank you.
Thank you. Council, other questions on this item? I just like that.
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
My question is related to the funding specifically. I know that we've said that we're allocating, I believe it was $6.9 million to this program. I know we received a total of, I think it was close to 90 million from the federal government. So I guess my question is, how much of that money do we have left, and how are we determining how much to allocate? We have the small business program. I think we've talked about the utility program and now this one, and I'm just trying to figure out How are we budgeting this money? Are we just sort of just spending it as each program comes up? Like, what does that process look like?
So Councilmember Whitaker, first, the 6.9 million is coming from completely separate buckets of dollars. So that is not part of the Corona relief funds that we received, that $90 million bucket that you just talked about. This program, this first $500,000 budget does impact that bucket. So it's the first time that we're using really these homeless services or any kind of a homeless type program for the $90 million fund.
Okay, so I guess my question would be the same back at a higher level. I mean, so you're saying we've used 500,000 of this out of the program. What does the overall budget of this program look like that we have left? You know, because I guess I'm just trying to determine, like, how are we determining how much funds to allocate to each of these programs?
okay.
Whether it be homelessness,
Sure,
food supply.
90. So thank you, Mayor, Councilman Whitaker. I think now that we feel like we've probably gotten most of the guidance that we're going to get on the 90 million, we can come to you. There are a few other programs that we haven't had a chance to visit with the council about that we would propose. So maybe next week, that would be something we could share with you as kind of the anticipation of how we see the allocation of the 90 million. It's just taken some time for us to get clarity. Well, there's still conversations going on about how the funds would be spent. And so we'll be glad to bring that to the council. As you mentioned, large portions of that have already been identified through the Business Reemergence Program, through the Food Security Program. And so we'll be glad to come back with some other programs. A lot of the other programs you're going to find have to do with city facilities, healthy facilities, some issues related to cost recovery for public safety. So we'll bring those back to you with at least the assumed allocation that we have right now, so you can see the big picture of the $90 million.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, and then Mr. Thompson.
Hey, Natalie, sorry to bug you again. On slide 16 or PowerPoint 16, that's why I asked about purchasing a hotel. It says that in parentheses, a new leaf but yet you say you're renting a hotel?
So, Councilmember, Vice Mayor, so and maybe we should get to that slide next. We wanted to program we were talking to you about up to this point in order to support the effort that the police department, this initial wave of enforcement, we needed to make sure we had sheltering places to take those individuals. The police officers under Boise v. Martin cannot enforce urban camping, trespassing, unless we have a place that we can take the individual, offer the individual. So what we're doing is renting out, what did you say, 100?
100.
About 100 rooms throughout the city east and west side. What we're going to present to you, maybe we should just go to that slide now and have Natalie talk to you. And we also have Mr. Mike Hughes here to also support and explain. But we're also considering that maybe the funding we have, whether it's a combination of the federal CARES funding with some of the CDBG funding or home funding, whatever, we want to discuss with council is beyond December, the program, do we need to think about in terms of, instead of just renting rooms 100 at a time every day for months on end, does it make sense for us to consider partnering with New Leaf and possibly considering a sheltering program that's more permanent, that we can use funds today that are available through CARES, but then could continue beyond December 30th. And that's what we want to just kind of get a feel for council. I'm going to let Natalie just cover that real quickly if you don't mind, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions about that.
Chris did a pretty good overview on that.
Sorry.
But what I wanted to say is that this is it's very preliminary, a concept stage. So we haven't made any plans at this point. We just have heard some other cities across the country are looking at this option because it gives you both a short-term fix for COVID and isolation, but it also, as Chris was just saying, can lead into a long-term solution. In Mesa, we have only 189 emergency beds, emergency shelter beds, and so we're constantly looking for a little bit more capacity, and so this could be something that could become part of that. So that's what we're thinking about doing. But before we did anything, and Mike is here to talk too about his ideas if we were to go in this direction, but we didn't want to go too far without doing a touch base with council first.
So if we could, maybe we could invite Mike Hughes just to come up, because I think what is important in this program, where we've kind of looked at other programs where we were kind of more trying to react, is that they were reactionary sheltering, where they would be very temporary. Even we've been proposals of setting up tents, setting up very short-term sheltering. But I think our conversations with New Leaf have been very, very productive, and I think partnering with them not only provides the shelter, but it provides the oversight, the management, the extension of services. So maybe, Mike, you could just talk about your thoughts about the role you could play.
Well,
Hey, Chris, Mike, excuse me, just let me follow up. Are we reaching out to our neighboring communities? And I'll just say it this way, Mesa seems to always take the lead. Our neighboring communities to the south of us, to the east, do we have conversations with them about taking some of these services in their communities? And I know what you're going to tell me, but just for the record, I just want it to be known that putting a bunch of social services in West Mesa again just complicates everything we're doing.
I understand.
And I know this messaging has been got to staff, and I get that. But with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Great points. We hear you. I think what we're trying to find, when Natalie mentions how many sheltering beds are in Mesa, that doesn't mean that all of those sheltering beds are available to Mesa. It just means that's how many beds are in Mesa. There are communities that are bringing some of their homeless that need sheltering into our community to because they're available. One of the solutions we've thought about is us taking a little more control and having facilities that are only exclusively available where Mesa can place individuals, so that we always have capacity. But we understand your sensitivity. I think what our commitment is that on a regional basis, this is one of the solutions that would help us. And I think on the political side, and maybe I'll let the mayor speak to it more than I can, there is a lot of discussion going on between Mesa, Phoenix, and Tempe about how to, what's the word, Mayor? Encourage, persuade the other communities to step up also. But I don't know if you want to talk about that first, or you want Mr. Hughes to kind of speak whatever order that needs to happen, Mayor. It's up to you.
Oh, I think it'd be good to hear from Mike, and then we can have a council discussion after we get all that material out. Go ahead, Mike.
thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. I think the bottom line here, so to speak, is the city potentially has in my opinion, an opportunity. It's just a fair way to say it, with the dollars that are being received through the COVID pandemic. We've been approached, as you know, we do East Valley Men's Center, 95 beds. We're looking at increasing that capacity by 20 more beds. We have the La Mesita Family Homeless Shelter. So the discussion came up, is there an opportunity to do something because of the homeless problem in Mesa? Could we do something in partnership with the city and have something a little bit more permanent? And we've just been looking across the entire geographic area and looking at maybe a 50 to 60 bed motel, hotel with kitchenettes, efficiencies, and trying to work with not just the single men, but potentially the single women, and actually childless couples. So they're all out there. And what we would be able to do and work with the other agencies is to do case management, workforce development, financial literacy, permanent supportive housing, many, many group activities. And we wanted to get a feel, and I guess city manager's already mentioned this, but how does the council feel about this potential opportunity that might be before us in terms of doing something more with the homeless situation in the community?
And I think the mayor and council, the way we look at it is, and we could continue to lease out hotel rooms across the city for the next 4 or 5 months. And that's certainly possible and doable. Or could we look at our resources and say, maybe we could use those resources to address this short-term need, but position ourselves that even after December, we have acquired an asset that it will allow us to continue to provide those services, because the homeless concern and possibly the spread of disease is not going to end by the end of the year. We don't anticipate it. We think that we'll always have that challenge. And so we recognize the sensitivity of location and place, but working with New Leaf, we thought we just want to make sure council, how they felt about us at least exploring those options and coming back with some options to consider. Obviously, there's budgetary impacts, but we have a unique opportunity now with some resources that are both coming in from the federal CDBG and home funds, but as well as the CARES funding, maybe to position ourselves with an asset that could extend well beyond the period of this pandemic. And we wanted to, but we recognize, the city just going out and buying a hotel isn't the solution. We need a partner who is in the business of caring for and delivering services to this population and helping them, frankly, hopefully to get them off the street and get them back into our society. And so that's why we've worked with Save the Family, just so you know that, and we've decided that they would prefer to just provide assistance to directly provide funding to help individuals so that they don't lose the homes that they're in today. And that's the program they have requested and preferred that we fund them for that, and that's what we've accommodated. But talking with Mike, we thought we had a shared vision that maybe we could come to council with and get your thoughts on.
Thank you. I think Mr. Thompson had something, and Mr. Luna and Ms. Duff.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is just a comment on that piece, and this goes back to kind of what Councilmember Freeman said too, and I don't want to sound callous, but I'm of the opinion if you build it, they will come. So as you build more facilities and you offer more meals and you offer more subsidies for the homeless people, you're going to start getting more homeless people. And at some point in time, I believe we really should be focusing on the citizens of Mesa and how do we keep them from becoming homeless? How do we keep them safe? And how do we take care of those that are in need of help, that are citizens of Mesa? So again, that's just my statement. Going back to, because I'm still stuck on the enforcement piece, and I'm trying to see if there's a better way of doing things. And maybe, when you look at the whole process, would it be easier to put together a group that was very much like what we did for the homeless count that was done? So you have an initial group of people that go out and make contact with the homeless community, ask them if they want the help. If they want the help, then you can put the navigator, assign them or get a navigator to them to get the help. But those that don't, then we can come in with law enforcement to do the enforcement. And that way we're not, either taking, the 49 officers and lieutenants off the streets, or, to especially go out and hunt down the homeless individuals so you're not taking them off the street, and you're not ensuing the cost of a fully loaded officer to be out there doing this task, and that way they can continue to do their day-to-day task on the street. But once you make that initial run through with your volunteers or with whatever personnel that we used when we did the homeless count, let them go out, do the initial triage, and then bring it to law enforcement for enforcement of those that need to be those areas that need to be enforced.
Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, and maybe I should clarify the use of the officers that you mentioned. They are not being pulled from their duties from their street. These are specialized units who we're gathering in a pool type of a format. They will not all be out in force at one particular time. And initially in this first 2 weeks, we'll be using a significant number of them. But as we move through this process, we will not be using all of them at the same time. It will be in small pockets as necessary. As far as our patrol staffing related to, response to crime that you mentioned, those officers are not being removed from their duties. This will be somewhat managed as a task force model. Where much of this will be funded through overtime after they're done with their normal work week and their normal responsibilities. That's why there's such a large number of these specialized officers, so we have the ability to have 5 or 6 at one given time or one day working on something throughout the city. So first, they will not be pulled from their normal duties, and two, all of them will not be functioning at the same time. The program that you mentioned a minute ago was our Operation Mainline. And we do intend to continue with that model after we get through this COVID pandemic. However, we do believe that there is an enforcement need on the front at this point. We cannot simply just send untrained, non-sworn folks out to some of these areas because we do believe there is a public safety concern. So on the very front end of this, we do believe that there has to be an enforcement option on the forefront. And if in those contexts services are received, we will ensure that they were given those proper services, or the right groups will be contacted to provide those services.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I make a comment?
Of course.
I just wanted to add, and I hope I don't put my foot in my mouth, but as a longstanding Mesa citizen, as a former elected official, I realize, Councilmember Thompson, your concerns. And I would like to just state that there's no way that the homeless issue, quote, would be resolved with a program like this. But I think what we're looking at is, with 75 to 80% of the people that are in the library are homeless, with downtown businesses very, very frustrated with the homeless population, it's rising. And I think that this program could provide some kind of centralized opportunity, so it's not so spread out and hard to work with, but it more gives us the opportunity to do the very things that the council's trying to promote, and that is a safer, more friendly downtown and the services. And I think where the agencies come in, we would try and join together and provide this type of service while the opportunity is there, because the population is increasing.
Well, and thanks, Mike, for that. But my concern is that back to Councilmember Freeman, our regional partners in this aren't really doing a whole lot, and they don't offer the services that we offer. So you obviously don't drive into downtown Gilbert and see a large homeless population in downtown Gilbert, because there's no services in downtown Gilbert for the homeless community. They don't have a light rail to travel on. They don't have the soup kitchen there to feed the folks. So homeless people aren't going to gravitate towards an area where there's zero services provided, unless they just totally want to be left alone, right? But we offer all those services, so everybody comes to Mesa, whether it's by light rail or walking or otherwise. And so, I hate that Mesa ends up bearing the brunt for the East Valley when our partners around us aren't really doing a whole lot. And to Councilmember Freeman's point too, West Mesa gets just really inundated because that's where all the services are. And I think that if our neighboring communities were to offer assistance, we would see less and less homeless in our downtown area. We'd see less and less homeless, congregating around businesses and so forth. And that's my only concern is that, again, you build it and they will come. And we continue to build it and then we continue to have the same problem and we continue to try to find solutions to resolving the problem when maybe the solution is just quit building it and force the homeless to go to other areas to seek help so that we're not inundated and overloaded not only on our public safety side, but on our nonprofit and faith-based community side as well.
So Mayor and Council, those are very good points. The dilemma we face is that we cannot do anything with enforcement if we don't have a shelter to take the individuals to. And I think part of the conversation we need to continue to have, and Mr. Hughes is definitely working with us on this conversation, is how our nonprofits that are providing these services, how many beds should they make available to communities outside of Mesa? Because it is important to council to know there are communities that do bring the homeless population to the providers here in Mesa. So that is a concern for us. But priority, right. If we don't.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is, I understand that, with the Boise Supreme Court ruling, or the court ruling, again, can we not partner with Chandler, Gilbert, Apache Junction, some of the other areas to have that facility, to build that facility or to buy that facility so that it's in their community and not in Mesa. And that way we can take our homeless population that wants help and direct them to Gilbert, to Chandler, to Apache Junction, to Queen Creek, and some of the other communities as regional partners. We can't just continue to build and offer services in Mesa when nobody else around us is doing that. It's not sustainable.
Okay, I'm sure we'll continue this conversation. Mr. Luna has a question or comment.
Yes, Mr. Brady, I was going to ask you a question. Maybe we might want to look at the city geographically, if the goal is to maybe purchase some kind of facility. I appreciate that Mike is here, can talk about a New Leaf. They have a 50-year history of providing services in this community, and they've done a wonderful job. And they continue to do a great job in working with our homeless population. We have the Men's Center, we have La Mesita, and we have other facilities. And so I would certainly support working with a New Leaf because of the reputation. But my concern is the continued operation. But then are we going to leave the burden to a New Leaf to continue absorbing these operational costs as we move forward?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm sure Mike and I are going to have that conversation. We've talked about it. I think the idea is on the concept that we're trying to at least discuss with council is the possibility that the city has unique opportunity with some available funding to acquire the asset and then work with an agreement with New Leaf to begin to manage and operate that facility and provide the services. And with that kind of commitment, obviously, I think the council we'd have to be certain that we would be committing to support them with future funding that we get through CDBG and other services to be able to support that. Because if we don't have a partner who can manage and operate these facilities and provide those wraparound services for this community, then it's not worth pursuing. I mean, the city we don't do that. That's not a service we provide. But we could acquire the asset and then have a partnership with someone like New Leaf to provide those services. And we would obviously then have to have a commitment to help provide the funding to support that over an extended period of time.
So I would encourage you, Chris, if you would look at it geographically, where would be a good location for acquiring some kind of asset. So maybe it's just not concentrated in one specific area of the city of Mesa, because I understand that there's pressure from probably the west side of the community that they're absorbing a lot of the issues related to homelessness. So that's something that I would recommend. I encourage you to work with a New Leaf simply because they have the reputation, they know how to provide a service. But I am also concerned about their ongoing operation costs if this is something that we're going to move forward. And I know that a New Leaf would have to work with their board in terms of how they move forward in this kind of process.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of quick comments. Number one, Mr. Brady invited me to talk a little bit about what the regional participation status is. And I'm unfortunately, I need to report to you that ever since COVID erupted, that has derailed conversations with our neighboring communities about helping them to accept a larger role going forward. So prior to the COVID outbreak, the governor and others were at the county level were committed to facilitating, invitations to our neighbors and to help them see the need for them to assume a larger role. Right now, it's absolutely true that Phoenix is doing the heavy lifting. The cash shelter is in downtown Phoenix. Mesa, we send our homeless people to Phoenix. They go to the cash shelter. I mean, but we also have a lot of services in Mesa too. So there's a lot of cities that are sending folks to Mesa for services. But I think we need to acknowledge that Phoenix is really bearing even a larger brunt than Mesa is on this. And then the rest outside of Mesa and Phoenix, not so much. So there is a lot to be done to help our neighboring communities realize that they need to step up on this. With regard to the facility, the motel, as I have talked with law enforcement, particularly law enforcement that deals with the homeless population downtown, they've told me that the biggest challenge that they have are some of the rougher motels located in West Mesa, that is a magnet for criminal activity. I recall when we broke ground on El Rancho, the half of the crowd there was the Mesa Police Department, and they were celebrating the demolition of the El Rancho Motel because that was such a hotbed of crime. It was one of the biggest arguments for building El Rancho was getting rid of the El Rancho Motel. So I think there is some positives. If we can have a long-term impact in rehabilitating some of these really bad locations in our community with some of this COVID money, instead of just using it on a short-term basis to rent motel rooms, and a few months from now that money will be gone and not have a lasting impact in our community, I think we ought to look at it. Now, I say that acknowledging the merits of the complaints of West Mesa, that they have borne more than their share of the obligation for providing services. So I'm not ready to say yes or no to committing some of these COVID dollars to the purchase of a motel, because it's the devil's in the details. It all has to do with what is the site, what is the deal, what is the size, who's going to operate it, all of those details. But I am open to exploring using this money in a way that will have more of a sustainable impact on the community. Back to the other issues we were discussing earlier about the whole enforcement issue. I have talked with some of the Mesa Police Department groups that would be included in doing this updated off the streets program, and they're actually looking forward to this because, as we've talked about, calls for service are down, motor vehicle accidents are down. Some of these groups within the police department, frankly, can do more because they have some additional capacity. So while calls for service are down, motor vehicle accidents are down, the homeless presence in our city, and particularly in downtown, is up. So I think reallocating some of these resources to address the reality makes a lot of sense. I'm anxious for Mesa to be known as a community that's compassionate and where people and a community that doesn't shirk its ability to provide for homeless and folks that are in need. But I agree with the sentiment that's been expressed here that we need to have rules in Mesa, and we need to make sure that we're not doing that we're not attracting more than our share because of the neglect of our neighboring communities. So a while back we had a little incident in, well, not a while back, I think on a continuing basis we have incidents at our parks. And I'm aware that there are Phoenix and maybe others that have adopted some ordinances that discuss providing services in parks and discouraging well-intentioned individuals from feeding, bringing food, or doing other things that encourages the homeless population to essentially encamp themselves at the parks. I would, Mr. Brady and Natalie, I'm very interested in pursuing an ordinance similar to what they have in Phoenix that regulates what activities can occur in the parks with regard to distribution of food and other things, so that we can encourage and direct those individuals that we want to receive services to go to a more appropriate place to receive those services. So having said that, maybe Natalie or Mr. Brady, you can comment on the idea of what action can the council make to assist with this process by perhaps regulating our parks a little more.
Oh, yes, Mayor. I think we're looking into that, trying to see what best practices are. We're not sure if it's specific to parks or maybe broader to neighborhoods, but I think there's a concern where individuals with good hearts but maybe don't recognize the problems, challenges that they're creating by just handing out food to the homeless. So we are, let me get back to you, Mayor. I think we've got some people looking that up, but I think that if that's an interest of council, we'll explore what would need to be done on our behalf as a city to regulate that, so we could help these groups to be a little more aware of their actions, and we don't want to perpetuate situations that can create chaos and frankly, concern in our parks because as it becomes an attraction and it brings a lot of people into the area, and it's just not a good way to distribute food. So yes, Mayor, we understand your concern. We agree with it, and we want to see we're trying to look to see what options the city might adopt to regulate that.
Okay, thank you. I know Councilmember Duff had another question.
Yes, I wanted to convey my support in looking at this. And one of the reasons is I keep in touch with Mesa United Way, and I constantly hear of stories that just break my heart of families that come to them and saying, I'm being evicted, and they have no place to go. And Mesa United Way has no alternative or any place for them to go. There's a year wait for transitional housing. So with this COVID-19, what we will experience in homelessness, especially as the moratorium on evictions lifts, a year from now is going to be tremendous. And whatever we can do to keep those families avoiding the homelessness, they're homeless because they're evicted, and to keep them, get them, provide a safety net so they can get back up on their feet and get into regular housing. I think this hotel option will provide a great service to our community, because the economic impact of what we're facing is unknown and is expected to be great over the next couple of years. Homelessness has doubled in the last 5-6 years because of a lack of housing that's affordable to live in, and with good employment. Now, we won't see any relaxing of rates for housing. There's still a strong demand, but the unemployment rates, it will be a long time. It'll take us a couple of years before a lot of people get back out on their feet. And even if they get that job, just from not having any income for several months beyond unemployment, we're going to receive a reaction in our community. So whatever we see in homeless, which seems unbearable right now, we've got to prepare for it to become much, much worse and do as much as we can. Long-term, in using a hotel, we could transition that into being transitional housing with the wraparound services. So these are not homeless, but these are individuals, again, that, providing that little safety net for a couple months until they can get back into an apartment and help them be in our way. So much easier to be that safety net and get people back in to housing than it is to allow them to be homeless, fall into the crowd, and then it's very costly and has an impact on our community in a number of ways. As far as the regional support, we do have $1.5 million that we have set aside in our budget and home dollars to work together with other cities to create a regional solution for homelessness, transitional housing, affordable housing, whatever that looks like. Maybe it'll be a combination, but we do have money set aside. So that's not an either or thing. I see the hotel as an and I think it's very needed. As far as the location, I would advocate to make sure that it is within reach of public transportation and services, healthcare, things like that people need to function. Because if you're homeless, you don't have a car. You need to be able to navigate life to get back on your feet. And if you're not, if it's away from any transit to be able to function, they're going to not be able to step out of the homeless thing. So, I understand, build it and they will come. They're already here. So it's a matter of, do we want them housed or do we want them on our streets? They're already here. And I think this is a step in the right direction and exploring this model and how it can make an impact, especially at this time in our economy hit by the virus. And we'll see the economic impact for the next couple of years, and it will be tremendous. So I'm conveying my support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we've had a lot of good discussion on this item. I appreciate everyone sharing some great questions and some concerns. Would it be fair to say that the consensus of the council is for staff to proceed with the operation off the streets for everyone's health and safety program and to explore the possible using some of our available funding for the acquisition of an asset? And then, of course, not approving the acquisition of an asset, but just to come back to council with a proposal. All right, I'm seeing a thumbs up and a finger, so I'm going to assume that Mr. Thompson's is a question and not a thumbs up.
Correct. More of a statement. I prefer that we as a city don't own another asset. I really wish on a lot of the buildings that we do own, we just put for sale signs on them and get out from owning a lot of the assets that we own. But I'm okay if somebody else wants to own it and operate it. I just prefer that the city not go out and purchase another asset, but I support the program. Okay, so why don't we talk about it separately? Give us a thumbs up if we're not necessarily voting, but are we in support of the police department for going forward with the operation off the streets? Okay, that's obviously the case. Speaking of the looking into the asset acquisition, I'm in favor of staff coming back to us with if we can spend money and it's got, we can acquire a blighted property or we can do something that, in future years can be redeveloped. I'm curious to hear the outcome of those types of, that type of research if the staff is aware. So I'll express support for that. I see Mr. Luna agreeing with me. Most of the other council, thank you, Mr. Heredia, Mr. Freeman, Ms. Duff. So I think that's all. Mr. Freeman gave me a finger too, so we'll have a.
I did there. I just don't want. I'm just thinking long-term economic development. If a motel or something's purchased, that it doesn't impede economic development. And again, in District 4, probably where that might happen. And I know that we need the Martin Boise because of that court ruling. But for the record, I'm tentatively supportive of it. I'd like to see the outcome of it. Okay.
Right, and I think to Mr. Freeman's point, in order for us to do urban camping enforcement, we have a shortage of emergency beds, and so we won't be able to enforce those ordinances unless we have. And right now, the way we're doing that is by paying for hotel rooms for individuals, and so I'm not sure that that's a sustainable, affordable approach to the problem. So I think the consensus is for staff to go ahead and come back to us with those ideas. So that concludes this agenda item. I've received some good suggestions that perhaps agenda item 2D, we continue to our council meeting prior to our study session prior to the council meeting on Monday. I think that's actually appropriate because we're going to be talking about utility assistance anyway, which is an issue that's on our agenda for the formal council meeting on Monday. So Mr. Brady, I think can the staff that's involved in that presentation come back on Monday?
Oh, I'm sure they're available. I just want to make sure Mr. Hughes can be here. He's nodding his head. I don't know if he's falling asleep or he's okay, good.
All right, thank you. So we'll continue that item. The next item on our agenda is item 3. That's to acknowledge receipts of minutes of various boards and committees. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you, Ms. Duff, seconded by Mr. Luna. We'll need to do a roll call vote. So I'll begin. Vice Mayor Freeman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitaker.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Heredia.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Duff.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Luna.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. So that motion passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is current event summary, including meetings and conferences attended. Council, who would like to begin? Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, I just, a couple of things. I'd like to recognize that this week is Police Week. So, this is, normally we would be, this time of the year, we'd be over at our Center Street, at our central police office, or the police commander place, police station, sorry, at the memorial, celebrating the lives of the 3 officers that have lost their lives in the service of the citizens of Mesa. But also I'd like to give a shout out to all of our essential personnel that have been working diligently and nonstop since the COVID virus took place. All of our first responders, both fire and police, all of our water department folks that are working diligently to ensure that we have clean, potable water, safe water. Our transportation department making sure that our roads and streets are taken care of, as well as our solid waste folks that are out there daily picking up trash and recyclables. So big shout out to them, and just to say thank you to all of them that are helping keep our city running on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Luna.
Yes, last Thursday we had a Facebook Live program, but I'll let Councilmember Heredia talk about that. Friday we had a food distribution at the Red Mountain United Methodist Church. Also attended on Saturday the Falcon Field Commemorative Air Force flyover on Saturday morning to acknowledge and to commemorate VE Day. So that was real nice. Monday, I created some more videos, Facebook in Espanol, relative to our feeding program here in the city of Mesa, and was interviewed by Telemundo. And then yesterday, from IT department, Stacy Knudsen, as well as Aaron, went through the process showing me how you apply for the small business loan application, small business grant application through the CARES program, through the Business Emergence program. So it was a great presentation, and I appreciate their help on that. And then on this Saturday, American Red Cross is in urgent need for blood donations because of the COVID virus, and there will be an emergency blood donation drive hosted by the Civil Air Patrol at the Falcon Field Squadron 305 this Saturday, beginning at 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. over at the Civil Air Patrol building at Falcon Field Airport.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot. Go ahead, Councilmember Duff.
Yes, I have just a couple of things to thank everybody for supporting the Mesa Family Night, takeout night. It's something that I've been looking forward to the last couple of Wednesdays to enjoy a nice meal that I can count on Wednesday nights and do an art project together in the desert. So thank you all for supporting that. You can find out more about that at visitmesa.com. And this Friday, the Mesa United Way has another fundraiser, and this is benefiting Foster 360, and it's an island Zoom party, so it's a Zoom party. And I attended the last one; it was great fun. This is a Jimmy Buffett theme, and so it'll be an island theme. And there'll be some music and a trivia questions and a lot of fun activities and socialization through Zoom for everybody to enjoy. You can find more about that. There's a Facebook event, or I'm sure it's on Mesa United Way's website. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Mr. Heredia.
Yeah, real quick. Thanks, David. Last week we did a digital summit in Spanish where we talked about the small business grant program, also resources from the SBA, Small Business Administration. We had a representative from that office, a representative from our Economic Development Office, and from the East Valley Hispanic Chamber. Got good traction and information out there in Spanish. So that was last Thursday, and we're working on an additional update in the next couple of weeks as far as the Spanish Digital Summit as well. And then just a quick shout out for Porter Elementary. Mayor and I did just a thank you. The Census Task Force in Mesa partnered with Mesa Public Schools and the other school districts on a student video contest, and Porter Elementary students won that contest. They did a great video highlighting the census and the importance of it and why people should respond. And so we got on a Google Hangout and talked to some of the students there. So thanks to Principal Ray at Porter and the students there that worked on the video and got the most votes in their contest. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Reddy. I appreciate being included in that. The kids at Porter Elementary School, really, you can tell that people are starved for a companionship again. They were really having a fun time on that call. So thanks for suggesting that. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo Councilmember Thompson's comments on our essential workers. Yesterday, I saw my meter reader on my street, waved to him. I mean, he seemed really happy. And then as well as our solid waste and transportation departments. I mean, these guys and men and women, all the supportive, our fleet support, our IT. I mean, there's a lot of work going in to keep our city functioning properly. The only question I would have for the mayor and maybe Mr. Brady is when our household hazardous waste facility might open in the future. I think we're probably getting there. When you show up at the HHW, they're already in protective PPE. So basically you can open your trunk or your back of your whatever and pick it up and go. But thank you for my council members. I enjoy working with you.
Thank you. I'll defer to Mr. Brady. That's a great question. I'm sure the household hazardous waste facility will be very popular when the stores reopen. I've cleaned out my every room in my house a few times here over the last few weeks, so it'd be a great opportunity to take some stuff where it belongs. I just want to echo Councilmember Duff's comments about the Wednesday night food specials downtown. That's a great event. We've got wonderful restaurants downtown. The Mesa Arts Center is contributing, some arts projects to this. So if your families aren't doing that, I encourage you to take a look at that. Also, yesterday morning, I appreciated being part of the canned food drive. As you know, this is rotating around our community every Wednesday from 8 to noon. Yesterday was out at the Eastmark Great Park. A lot of very generous folks came and contributed a lot of great food. I was really impressed by the generosity of our community. So let's keep that up. Tuesday of this week, we held a Zoom graduation service for the Mayor's Youth Committee. This is an amazing group of young people in our community, really a bunch of overachievers from all of our high schools. We had to cut short some of the activities we had planned for them, but they were really good sports about it. But I just would encourage, if you are a junior, next year going to be a junior or a senior at a Mesa high school, encourage you to think about becoming a part of the Mayor's Youth Committee. Also, in keeping with our Thursday afternoon webinars, today at 1:30, I'll be joined by Jay O'Donnell, who we all know well as our Assistant Economic Development Director, and we will be walking through in detail how to participate in the Small Business Reemergence Program. So we'll be providing an update on some of the details of that. And hopefully answering some questions online. It'll be on Facebook Live, but also mesaz.gov/digital summit. I think we all are anxious to spread the word as far and as loudly as we can to encourage small businesses to participate in that program. So we'll be delving into some of the details of that and encouraging people to further take advantage of that program this afternoon at 1:30 on Facebook and on the webinar. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Brady. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor, I just wanted to say thank you for the shout out for the food drive at Eastmark. Hirschberg, Mr. Hirschberg just told me that there was over 3,600 pounds of food collected out there. So great job to the community, and thanks for mentioning that, Mayor.
You bet. Mr. Brady, what does our schedule look like?
So, Mayor, we'll meet on Monday. We'll probably start at 5 so we can have the discussion about the expanded utility assistance program that we're proposing. So we'll do that, and then we'll review the agenda, and we'll have our council meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Council, please unmute your microphones because we're just going to do a voice vote to adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Luna. Seconded by Mr. Thompson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.